everybody. Welcome to another Proko live stream. Today, we are joined by Sterling Hundley himself, a fantastic artist who wants to teach you how to take all of those skills that you've built up over time and actually put them into practice. I am your host, Steven, a Proko team member. I think you guys are familiar with what we do here on the Proko live streams, but I do want to make sure that you guys know that Sterling has a course that's on sale on Proko. You guys can get that for 20% off right now during that live stream. But we'd be doing this even if we didn't have anything to sell you guys. We just want you to make some art. Sterling, what are we going to teach people today?
Hey, Stephen, thanks so much. So first of all, I really appreciate being here. This is an amazing opportunity. I haven't live streamed in a while or done a demo in a while, but I thought I'd walk you all through just several processes. I know that with Proko.com, you're always working on fundamentals. You're building on just ways of observing and documenting. And there's another step to this. I've been working as a commercial illustrator for 25 years, and I really fell in love with illustration when I realized that, hey, I can solve problems with my art, and this entire industry is built around that. So design thinking, illustrative problem solving. So today I want to walk you through basically how to build up a drawing, how to think a little bit about illustration as problem solving, and then to really keep your drawing through your entire painting process so you don't lose it, you don't destroy it, and really kind of working with a variety of mixed media to do that. So that's the plan today, Stephen, and hopefully we teach some things and learn some things as we go.
I think it'll go well. Yeah. So I'm always curious about where everyone's watching from at any point in time when we do these live streams or anything. We've got a couple people here from Richmond, Virginia, which apparently someone else is saying they call it RVA. Is that true?
The RVA, that's my hometown. So I'm not sure who they are, but we've probably met. So hopefully you're doing well today.
You think everyone in Richmond, Virginia knows each other?
Yeah. In the illustration world, for sure. So I'm a professor at VCU, so I usually teach seniors as they're kind of going out in the field. And if you haven't been an illustration student or com art student at VCU, then maybe we didn't meet, but we probably have.
That's fair. Yeah, it looks like a bunch of people. Someone from SCAD is in here, in Savannah, awesome. Canada, Argentina. Thank you guys all for being here. Yeah, Sterling, you were talking about what you have on your desk before you being pretty messy. Are you ready for me to show it to people?
Yeah, give it to them.
All right. So this is Sterling's workspace, guys. I don't think there's anything messy here, judging from the other places that I've seen people working, including my own. But maybe Sterling, you can give us the art space organization course if this is messy.
Well, this is me trying to look organized. So, but really, I think that so oftentimes we're working with materials that we have at hand, and you're on a deadline, or you're working through something, and you're actually just trying to triage, because in professional circumstances you don't have endless times, and you have to get something out to an art director. But these are materials that I've learned to kind of use over the years, things I really prefer, things that I like. And let me just show you kind of what I got here. So first of all, kind of the foundation of it is I'm just working with a pencil drawing. And this is kind of based off of an illustration I did years ago called Audio Detective. It's the image we use for the banner. And it's probably been my most seen image. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to touch on that. And I always wanted to redraw the hand in that particular painting. So you look back at things and that's how it goes. But first of all, I'm working on illustration board. My preferred illustration board is Strathmore 500 series cold press. It's got a texture to it, and it's nice. It's the same surface all the way through. It's not glued to a weird substrate, and it's not going to buckle on you when you start painting. So just really important. I see a lot of artists struggle. They do these beautiful drawings, they try to paint them, the paper curls, and it just kind of ruins everything. So start with a strong foundation. Illustration board's kind of a go-to for me. Second of all, you don't have to use these. I'm just a big fan of Blackwing pencils. This is a 602. It's got the right weight to it as far as what I'm trying to do. And you'll see kind of how we use this value structure here to kind of paint into and let that be the foundation, almost like a Grissauld painting in traditional art. So we want the values to serve as the values in our drawing. We don't want to destroy the drawing. We want to complement it. So whatever pencil you have, you can check these out, but a 2B pencil, anything that's kind of in the B range, 2B, 1B, 3B, something like that. Don't go down into the H's because they actually scrape the board and they don't leave enough soft pigment to make this technique work. So that's there. I've got an assorted brushes here that I don't keep very clean, but I've got a script liner, which I really like. You can kind of see that set up there. It's got a long bristle on it. You'll see kind of why I like those. I've got rounds. I've got rounds and flats. I've got big, cheap brushes that are coming from the hardware store, nice and soft. For this technique, you want two brushes. One's going to have water in it, and the other one's going to be kind of a soft brush to fan out some values. I've got palette paper here to my right. It's just wax paper to mix my paintings, my paint on. And then I've got acrylic paint in ketchup bottles. I learned this trick from the great Mark English, but you pre-mix paint and you're ready to go anytime. So this is acrylic paint, Liquitex, unbleached titanium white. All this stuff is listed in the assignment download, which, Stephen, I think you've got the link to that.
Absolutely.
Also have some reference, and I'll share that with you in a second. A couple other things that I really like. This is my go-to stuff. This is FW White acrylic ink by Daler Rowney, and it's super opaque. You kind of really got to get to the bottom of it and scrape it up to make it work, but really cool stuff. You can run it through your brush or through a dip pen, which I love these Proko pens. So it's got a lot of viscosity to it and really cool stuff. And then this is not a name brand I recommend. It's just an ink that I use. Make sure that if in this technique you're using a waterproof ink, it has to be waterproof. Otherwise, the water we use is going to kind of reactivate everything. That's a couple other things. A couple colors in gouache. I would for this technique, I would find something that's cool, and I would find something. I would find something cool and something warm. So the computer saw that I have color there. That's great. And
it was just about it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what. Oh, okay. That's not it. This nasty looking thing is a kneaded eraser. And I swear, like my students and my kids, like you can't use regular erasers. You got to use kneaded erasers. And this you kind of just stretch and it self cleans. But there's a very specific reason we'll be using this here on the drawing. All right. That's pretty much the prep, Stephen. Everything else is kind of jumping into it and showing you what we're doing here today.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, this sounds good to me. If you guys at any point in time, if you catch Sterling introducing a new tool that he didn't mention earlier, call it out in the chat. I want to know. If you guys are like, wait, what's he using there? I didn't hear him mention that. Ask about it. Just so you guys know, we will be taking questions throughout. Like Sterling encourages your questions. It might take us a little bit of time to get to something because it's like unrelated to what's being shown at the time. But if you guys want to like follow along with the reference or see any of those other materials that he was talking about, there's a link in the description as well as in the chat. All right, Sterling.
Beautiful.
Just show us how you do all the things that you do.
All right. So this drawing, I kind of prepped. One thing I cannot do in front of people and talk is draw. And drawing for me is it's like ideation. So coming up with ideas, I have to be in the right state of mind. I can't be distracted. I love to go to coffee shops to ideate. This particular concept is called Audio Detective. And really the story it was Virginia Living Magazine. And it was about this guy who was going through old record stores and kind of searching through milk crates, finding lost and forgotten music. No one ever told me it was called Audio Detective, but that's the text that I got. So rule number one with illustration, always start with text. I don't care if you're going into concept art, you're going into animation, you're going into illustration. If you have text to start with, that's oftentimes our job. We literally transcribe words into pictures. And that's kind of the premise of this whole thing with IdeaCraft is learn how to design pictures that speak louder than words. So that's kind of where we begin. I have an entire ideation process that basically starts as a distillation of themes, working down from the text into themes. And the two opposing themes that I decided on were audio and detective. I shouldn't say opposing, two themes that I had. And from there, I'm not going to get into the details of it because it just takes too long and it's not very interesting to watch. But anything that I can come up with is an icon for audio, headphones, microphone, speakers, things of that nature, I start to jot down as initial icons. And the detective things like I don't know, a magnifying glass. You'll see that the original window. I start to pair these things together and try to find shape and metaphorical parallels between those things. So that's the start in a nutshell. And I send sketches off to my client. I come back, and once those are approved, I shoot reference. So this is where I have to laugh at myself. This is reference that I shared in kind of the assignment pack. I did this for a very specific reason, because I have a huge ego. No, it's hopefully it's hopefully because I can show you some things that I'm actually looking for in the drawing process when I try to take ownership of reference and not just transcribe exactly what I'm seeing. So your style, which leads to your voice, is your ability to deviate from the observed, right? So let me frame that a different way. If you're in a figure drawing class and your professor comes around and they say, hey, that looks great, it looks just like what I'm seeing, then you get good marks for that. That's a really good figure drawing because it looks like the thing that you find consensus on. Your style is your deliberate breaking away from consensus. So you have to say, I like these shapes because I like these shapes. I like this design because I like these designs. And that step of ownership is immensely important as you start to set yourself up distinctly from the marketplace. So just a few things there, why I've got the reference the way I have it. You can see I've got a few things here, and I've got a couple other shots over there, but I think I'm using essentially this shot here for the hand. And I went back and kind of redrew this other hand here. That's from this. But I want to show a few things here, just as I've got all these errant strokes, and hopefully some of them are coming through. Some are getting blown out a little bit. But I start to look for shapes within shapes. And one thing that you do is the more you look, the more you see. So I start to get into things like this delineation here. I've got this mark that cuts through like the eyebrow. And you can see I'm finding parallels, like with the shape of, I placed that hand exactly there so it would pick up on the shape of that eyebrow and anything else I might pick up over here too. In the world of design, we use grid for layout, right? So we align things, and beautiful design is unseen, but it's felt. I think about drawing like this as your way of building your own grid or armature, where everything's referencing something else. You can see I'm searching for these circles here in the shape. Well, it's repeating the record player. Small circles, medium circles, large circles. Finding certain edges that I like is really important. Lots of triangles within this information. So that's the drawing in a nutshell. And as you're looking at the reference, let me see if I can use a marker here for this. 1 second.
We got a couple good questions in the chat so far. Just stacking them up. Keep them coming, guys.
Please do. Let me move this out of the way real quick. So I'm watching my son draw, and he's a really good draftsman. He's 11 years old, and I should show some of the Hellboy drawings that he's doing. They'll blow your mind. But
Sterling, you there? Thank you.
Let's see. Let's get it to reset here. Hold on.
It might happen every once in a while. There we go.
Beautiful. All right. So one thing that we do as artists is we draw vertical and horizontal lines really well. We can actually see those types of things pretty easily. And I can kind of see with something like this that the eye line is not quite parallel, right? It's something to think about. I can also see that this shape of the jaw over here is also not vertical, but this part of my forehead is. And when I'm drawing things, yes, I'm thinking about those angles, but the way we can kind of get those angles right is by drawing this box. I know it's hard to see on the screen there, but if I'm aware of that vertical, I can figure out that angle based off of that. So I use a lot of these guidelines to end up kind of giving shape and figuring out placement. And for me, a lot of drawing it's frankly like math. You're trying to find plot points on a grid that you can kind of reference. Now, I've been drawing a long time and I don't use grids at all, but I am kind of building my own structure as I start to lay these things out. So if you're struggling with proportions, you're struggling with angles, that's a little inside trick on how you can actually work through some things and determine where you want those lines to be and get them a little bit more accurate and correct.
Mhm.
Always look at the negative space, not just the positive space. Look at both. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a thing that people often overlook because they get so lost in the idea of wanting to craft this perfect line with the juicy line weight changes and everything.
Yeah,
But getting that nice lay-in, it just sets you up so you don't have to focus and go back so often.
100%. And here's another thing. So this is, I told you I'd show you this kneaded eraser and kind of how it works. I will massage this thing out into this very strange looking log here. And just from experience, I know that if I go over top of this with paint, it's going to get really muddy. Like it's dark enough where it's going to actually affect things in a negative way. Muddy painting is typically when things have too much black in them. Chalky paintings have too much white. And this is just a little trick that I found that lessens and lightens the value overall, all at the same time. So I can take this and lay it out and just kind of lightly go over my drawing. And everything's still there. So, Stephen, all those guess lines or those things, that aren't perfect, that's one thing about illustration is it's a process where we know that we're going to end up covering up a lot of the mistakes and the errant lines and everything else. So there's no risk in going through and searching for the correct information. But I don't know if that's coming through on the screen or not. That's about 1 or 2 stops in value lighter than it was.
Mhm.
And it's not going to mix as aggressively with the paint when I put it down. So
Yeah.
that's all good.
So for some of you guys watching it at home, it might not have seemed like quite as drastic, but for anyone who's predominantly a digital artist, it's just like when you take your sketch layer and you just lower the opacity of the thing to work on top of it.
Exactly.
Just taking off like a good 20% of the thing.
Perfect analogy. And I'm a digital painter too, so it's I do all of it, and finding those parallels between digital and traditional. So many of them come from traditional materials and experiences. It's just built around the way that we kind of see things. So
Mhm.
I'm going to see if I can bump this contrast just a little bit. If you can give me 1 second here.
Yeah. Just as a little aside from the chat here, Stonks says those hands are beautifully done.
Thank you. I was
Were you worried about them?
well, I was featured in a really popular blog years ago, and I got beat up for the way I drew hands. And so it's one of those things where if I've got reference and I can kind of spend time on them, I do well. If I try to invent them, they're going to look like sausage fingers. So thank you. You made my day there. All right. So now that I've got this kind of kickback, I'm going to go in with unbleached titanium white, and I've got water here. And what I'm going to do on the side is just take a little bit of water. I probably should have a little dish, but all the stuff and getting prepped for things gets confusing. Look at my water dripping there.
You got to use ketchup and mustard bottles.
Yep. So I'm going to dilute this as much as I can, and it's almost imperceptible on my screen, but it's got almost a skim milk kind of thickness to it. The brush ready because this is my paintbrush. I can even go with water on top of this, and I know that seems kind of strange, but that'll help dilute it. And we can lightly start to put this paint over. If you're really timid, you don't want to mess up your painting. Just be very subtle in the beginning. We don't want to agitate it. And I'm going to go a little bit darker. I know that's not going to show up on camera very well.
So for those people who they're not predominantly painters, and so they're trying to really expand what they've been doing, what they've been trying out, and start working with paint a little bit more. What would you say to them if they're worried about putting all this work into a sketch and then just covering it up with something opaque?
I think that's the number one reason people kind of jump into digital first, because you have layers, right? And let me answer that as I go, because I have to kind of hit this while it's wet.
Yeah.
So you can see it's got a light value to it. I'm going to take this other brush and start to move things around a little bit where I want them to be soft. I want some shape welding to kind of happen.
So this is actually you're trying to manipulate what you first laid down in your initial sketch with this.
Exactly.
Okay.
So this can give me soft edges where I want them, and a lot of the blending is going to happen kind of naturally. I don't have to do this everywhere, but it gives me some selective opportunities to kind of get real nice softness in certain things and let the pencil and the paint kind of mix. So I know it sounds crazy, but it's like I had a drawing and now I have a painting. And what's the difference? Well, I painted on it. It's like, it's the simple step of actually bringing pigment in, and I can start to kind of build these things up.
Yeah, I think a lot of times they think of the idea that working from a sketch to a painting is you have those two different things, like you were saying. But at the end of the day, it's just more stuff under it. Like if you have a drawing and let's say you're working in just pen and ink, a thing that pretty much everyone has done. If you build up a thing with your sketch layer and then you ink over on top of that, if you make something entirely black, but then use some whiteout over the thing, you're just resetting it to paper. It's all additive. And
Right.
it's the same kind of thing with the painting. You're just building more on top of it.
Great point. And that's all we're going to do here is like once we push this back, the nice thing that happens with this color, and this is something I found in college, I just was experimenting, and the pencil starts to read as a blue, right? So it actually, like this is warm enough that this starts to make the pencil actually read not just as gray, but it gets a little bit of a blue tone to it. You'll get some greens in there from that mix, but it also darkens the value of the paint I'm using because we just mixed it. So I can go back with the very same color and paint lights into it, and it'll read lighter than what I just put down, right? That'll make some more sense here in a minute. I'll show you this example. This is something a little portrait I did of my daughter here. This is entirely just the pencil and that same color paint. And you can see like areas where it gets cooler down below, that's more pencil exposed with less paint. And then areas where it gets warmer and lighter, those things are happening all at the same time. It starts to give that impression of structure and form. So that's essentially what we're going to kind of do into this. This drawing's a little bit darker than that other drawing right now, but the process is the same.
Mm-hmm. There was a question where someone did ask in here again. They asked, someone seemed to have answered for you, but what paper stock did he say he is using? So for those who come in and then might wonder what it is you're using and weren't here in the beginning, we'll just name them off as you grab them, I guess.
Great. Yeah, this is a Strathmore cold press 500 series illustration board. It's like super art nerd talk, right? But it's one of those things I think that students want to know is like, I want to increase my chance of success by just starting not at the very beginning, but in the middle, and knowing your materials, knowing what to use, that you're not going to be fighting the support. It's not going to be buckling on you, and you can, salvage your drawing. That gives you a lot of confidence to kind of take some of these risks and move forward. So I'm just going through and adding a little bit more of this unbleached titanium white to everything else. And a big part of the reason I'm doing this, Stephen, is yes, it's a painting process. But when I was in school, everybody was using spray fixative, right? Mm-hmm. So they go through and it's like this plastic fixative, and it's like, okay, well, you're going to do your drawing and then you're going to seal it with plastic fixative. It's like, that's atomized plastic. I mean, you're literally spraying these chemicals onto your board. It's like, yeah, you might wait an hour, but you're usually on deadline. So you go outside and you spray it and you bring it back in, your face is right down in it. And it's just a bad thing to have in your system. And it's like, well, it's acrylic and I'm going to be painting with acrylics. Can I just seal the drawing while establishing a midtone and affecting the temperature all at the same time? So it actually was consolidation of like 3 steps into one, which nothing is lost. I think it adds value because what it does to my line quality and everything else. So
I thought you were going for a pun there.
Not a pun. I realized when you smiled.
With value.
Value added. So you can see here, I'm going over this with more paint, and it's bringing the values closer. It's actually making the paint look less dark, and that's all good. I want to bring those values a little bit closer, just like you said with your sketch. You can kind of push back your opacity and your layers digitally. And oftentimes you want to bring these things closer together in value. Like that's one big thing that I see a lot of young artists doing is they blow their values out too far apart.
Mm.
And what we can do is actually keep them closer together and be more nuanced. We can bring more intense value in the negative space and things like that. But yeah, all those things are helpful. So these edges are very harsh. I'm bringing that paint over it just to soften those values a little bit more.
Do you think that there's any particular thing that like a newer artist is they're trying to achieve by having those values so far apart that you think they would be better served to do in a different way with
Well,
similar values?
I think that learning to control your values is a way that you become a master of hierarchy. And hierarchy is what's dominant in your picture. They say that a lot of, I'm letting this paint dry for a minute while we're talking too.
Mhm.
Um, they say that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, they would look at the great illustrators, Rockwell and Leyendecker, um, for composition and hierarchy, right? Because the illustrators, they didn't have images that moved, they didn't have bells and whistles and things that made sounds. They just had pictures and they had hierarchy. In hierarchy, it's a proxy for time, right? So if you have a 2D image and you can say, look here first, look here second, and then look here third, then you're holding someone's attention and leading them through a composition, oftentimes through value and contrast. So learning to control your value and say, not everything has to be a 0. You'll have this from all your lessons in Proko, but a 0 to a 10 in a value scale. It can be a 0 to a 3 or a 4 to a 7. And controlling your values allows that hierarchy to happen, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think knowing how a person is going to perceive the thing that you're showing them is wildly important. You guys are all on YouTube right now. Every time that you see a YouTube thumbnail that worked on you, that caught your attention, try to analyze what it was, where you actually looked in there, and then where you followed through. And it's just a fun little exercise that you can do to learn composition just in your normal life.
That's
It's
great
really interesting.
and real topical too. It's we do movie nights, and oftentimes I'm drawing while I'm watching TV with my wife, and I'll do compositional studies as I go. I can't do the compositional studies with her because I have to stop the movie. That doesn't go well for relationship. But if you're with other artists and you're looking to really level up your composition, get a giant marker. I mean, bigger than this, and just limit yourself to 2 values. Go through and just copy the composition. You'll learn a ton about composition that way. So
Mhm.
great place to study. All right, so I've got all this stuff kind of set in, and you can see there's a little bit of it's dry. So here's the next kind of step of the lesson. We've sealed the drawing now, or I've sealed the drawing. I've softened the edges. I have a differential in value between the white of the page, the midtones, the lights. All of it's kind of happening very naturally because I hit it with that soft brush, and we've established those darker values. I've also sealed the drawing with acrylic, and I call acrylic a dead medium, right? Because once it's down, you're not going to move it, right? So they say diamonds and plastic are forever, right? So that's that's the nice thing about it is like I would have to work really hard to move that pencil. I don't think I could actually. It's bonded with the acrylic. Contrasting that with gouache or watercolor, either one works. You can go through this now. I consider this a live medium because I can always reactivate this with water, right? So those two opposing ideas, dead media versus live media, is what we're going to kind of take advantage of next. And I'm going to just lay out a little bit of, again, here's some red. It's a really pretty vermilion here. And I've got some cerulean. I don't really care so much about what kind of color I have, like specifically. I just want a warm and a cool because we're going to use the paint we have over here and what we already established to create a sense of warm and cool. I'm just thinking of warmer versus cooler versus specific colors. So I'm going to get this out of the way, put a little bit of water down.
Someone did ask again in the chat here. Mike Havis was asking, the white paint in the bottle, is it watered down in the bottle as well?
It is, yes. Yeah. And just to be clear, it's not white. Like, it's called unbleached titanium white, but it's actually quite yellow. So this is by contrast.
Was that a clear bottle initially?
Yeah.
Okay.
It looked just like that one, but that's the color of the paint, right? And you can see it, if this is white paint, it's different.
It's much warmer.
Yeah, warmer, and also about 2 steps different in value. All right, so I'm going to start thinking a little bit about temperature here, maybe some things that happen kind of in the fingertips, the knuckles. This is just with that warmth that's going on. It's probably not showing the color great. I'm going to go a little bit more bold, just so you can kind of see it on the screen a little bit more. But
do you think that we'd be working pretty much in this kind of layout for the whole thing?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, if you're able to, if you want to bring the camera a little bit closer to the actual work, I think that would be okay.
Let me see if I can.
Yeah, you're good, I promise.
All right, good. My biggest challenge is just on my right shoulder here. So, but yeah, I think that's helpful, right?
Yeah, I think that brings us a little bit closer, and then I don't think the camera's trying to balance the green and things as much.
Understood. Yeah, great, good idea. So you can see how I'm just bringing some warmth into where the lips are, or the nose, maybe a little bit in the eyes. And you can be pretty liberal with this layout, with the way that you apply paint. You can go heavier if you want. I always encourage, just in the beginning, to be a little bit more sensitive, because the human eye has an amazing ability to actually discern values and colors, and we don't always need things to be super contrasty. And I'll show you kind of when I bring the darks in later, that'll do a lot of the work for us. But maybe a little bit of the cheek over here. Just picked up some blue. That's fine.
And do you when you say that you can work pretty intensely with this, do you think that's because it is a living medium, as you were calling it?
Exactly. So there's more margin for error when you put it down.
Mm-hmm. You're able to push it around later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
There's a comment here in the chat. This is Jocelyn saying, "Funny story. I had to imitate Sterling's process for an illustration course in college, and I think I cried because I got so frustrated. Gouache and I have been mortal enemies ever since."
Well, I'm sorry. Maybe there's a step in here that's going to unlock some of that for you. But I really don't even think about this as gouache so much. It's just like watercolor in the way that we're doing it. But I think if you go back to that process and you just think about, like, okay, I'm going to add a little bit of cool over here where I want some shadows to be. This is just kind of laying some things in that we're going to actually paint into in a little bit. So yeah, I'm sorry that you went through that. You could have emailed me. I probably would have gotten back to you. So we try.
So when you keep a shadow cool like this, is this because of a personal preference, or how you feel you have observed nature?
Yeah, and I know where that question is coming from, because shadows can change, right? So if you're in warm light, shadows are cool. If you're in cool light, shadows can be very warm.
Mm-hmm.
But just I think about them more as, again, cooler versus warmer. Cool colors tend to recede, warm colors advance. We can observe things like this in skin tone, where we've got capillaries closer to the skin, and just a number of things like that kind of let me, with confidence, kind of jump in and know these things are going to kind of mix anyways. And it's just, more than anything, it's going to give me color variety, right? So like on the forehead here, if I had some yellow, I might bring some more yellow into it. But I can go ahead and establish and push that cooler, which you can't see a whole lot, but it is definitely cooler and darker, knowing just the confidence of what I kind of have next in the next step. So it's almost like an author who knows how a book's going to end. I've got the benefit of knowing kind of what I'm doing next. So I'm going to go through now and establish a little bit of kind of a darker value around things, because I want to show you like you'll instantly see the picture better, um, because I'm establishing a darker value around it. So we get, it's hard to explain, but our ability to sensitively observe things is built around really contrast. And we don't have much contrast going on right now. But the moment I go back into this and I start to say things, okay, well, let's build more painterly kind of mark making here. And I'll show you something else here in a second. Um, I can be pretty liberal with how I apply this, knowing that I want it to be kind of brushy, and it's going to offset more of the tonal things that are happening in other parts of the composition, right? But even that, like, you become aware of that edge because of the dark value that's there, right? Um, of note, all these little guest lines and things I have, I kind of determined, I figured out years ago that if I can kind of paint around those things, then my decision making, my mistakes, if you will, become part of the final process.
Mm. I do. That's one thing that I think that continuously comes up, because some of our most popular videos are those with Kim Jung-gi or Peter Han, and other people who are working a little bit more loosely, but where it looks like they just drew with no underdrawing or no forethought, and they just achieved absolute mastery, like from their foreheads, you know?
Yeah,
Uh, and a lot of that is just incorporating your mistakes or the things that are a little bit more loose in that initial lay-in of a thing. I
yeah,
think it's something people need to plan for a little bit more.
yeah, and I think that embracing the chaos is a huge part of, you know, the lesson in painting is I reference it like this. I don't want to have a monologue with a painting. I don't want to go and tell it what to do. I
Mhm.
I want to have a dialogue. I want to be surprised by what's happening in front of me, and that requires, you know, it's really an evolution where you get to a place where you say, all right, I've I can draw what I see, and if I can draw what I see, then, and I realize that that's not the destination. That's a skill to learn, and my my destination is to find something unique and distinct and authentic in the work that I make that other people aren't seeing. So leaning into that, um, knowing that that chaos, that entropy is part of the process, you start to welcome it as you move along. So yeah, I relate to what you're saying a lot because it's a deliberate choice, again, to move away from the things that you can see so that you can take ownership of your pictures.
Mhm. Well said. Uh, if you're interested, I do have a couple questions.
Please fire away. It
All
fills
right.
the silence.
So for an earlier one, we got a question from the Inker. Thank you for coming down from your inky throne. What are the non-art materials you use as art materials? Toothbrushes and so on. Besides your ketchup bottles that you have your paint in right now.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the best places you can find art supplies is the hardware store. And so ketchup bottles, palette knives, house paint. I did a lot of gallery paintings with house paint as the foundation. And the nice thing about house paint is it's cheap and you can get it in high volume. Latex works a lot like acrylics, so that's what most house paint is. I'm not using oils, um, and yeah, it's they're wonderful paintbrushes for sure. I had a whole series where I painted with tar,
Hmm.
um, where I was inspired by uh, studied with Mark English, phenomenal painter. He was using tar. I gave it a shot. I learned how to paint with rust and wire using muriatic acid. And I'm not recommending this, but it's plaster and tie wire stuff I found at the hardware store. All of my supports are hardboard that I get
Mm.
at the hardware, like the for paintings. I get cut at the hardware store. So I would say that 80% of my materials come from the hardware store. Um, and that's just a start off the top of my head there, but great question.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the same thing applies for like many other things. So as a person who works in production, some of the things that they'll price at such a high premium, if you have a label on it that's for like it's for production, you know, from a camera company or a tripod maker or something, it'll be so expensive, but you can get the same thing that's normally like $700 for 20 at a hardware store.
Right.
Sure, there's a little bit of a difference, but by and large, they all get the job done.
Yeah. Yeah. You just kind of, you know, I think so many of us as artists, we bootstrap things, and there are certain supplies, like there's some beautiful oils that there's just no replacement with cheap materials. There's really nice brushes sometimes that I have certain, like my pencils. I really do like my Blackwing pencils. But there's a lot of things where it's just there's a sexiness to it. Like I'm gonna go get this really nice marker or this or that, and there's so many different ways where you might just be better off with just like a Ticonderoga number 2.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, every once in a while, just a good old number 2 pencil will do the work.
Indeed, indeed.
Good.
So just a point of note here, you're starting to see the hands more because the value is darker around it, right? So that contrast is very helpful in the way that we see things. I've been doing some different projects with different engineers and groups like NASA, and one of the things that you end up realizing is that they're training robots to see first and foremost in value, high contrast, no tan, chiaroscuro, like all these things that you're learning in art class on how we observe things. If you had to teach a robot how to see, that's exactly what you would do. Is you would focus on the highest contrast things first. And yeah, it's just interesting that all this stuff goes back to just observations from artists.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This is science going to the hardware store. They're like, instead of going to the hardware store, they're coming over to the art store.
There you go. There you
go. So Elia in the chat asked they said question for later. It's question for now. Sterling describes the meaning as a conflict between concepts. They thought of semiotics that has a similar framework. Do you implement semiotic theories into your process?
I wish I was well learned enough and smart enough to know what semiotics were when I started doing this. I found my way to a process, and it's very, very similar, but I would take it further that it works with certainly with metaphorical things, with analogies, with contrast. But that contrast for me was first observed in dark versus light, cool versus warm, big versus small, and those ideas of how we actually control communication and draw people's attention. I would say goes back to someone else smarter than me observing that these things are something to be learned and to be taught. So for sure, great observation.
Yeah, I dropped the definition in the chat here for anyone who's like, what? Semiotics is the study of signs and symbols and their use or interpretation. Just think symbolism.
Yeah.
And like anything that can be stretched out to be symbolism.
Which is anything.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah. So for this one, do you have anything that you would say about what you're doing currently, aside from establishing that contrast with the darker value right now?
Yeah, so a lot of this is I'm working with a brush that's uncomfortably big for the type of detail that I'm getting into, right? And there's something about that that's for me is really nice. It's hard. I'm getting some messy edges. I know that in a second here, I'm going to go back and use this same color diluted down, and I'm going to bring everything in the shadow together through some washes. So I'm kind of prepping for that next. But I think more than anything, it's just I'm worried about you all seeing the painting. Like I want you to be able to see it, and I know that where it was, even with the camera, it's probably 2 values lighter than what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And it becomes something that I want to make sure that you can see what I'm seeing. And that's a huge part of what working in chaos does too. So you look at like Craig Mullins, brilliant digital painter, and he's up there with Kim Young Ji as far as just a marvel if somebody works from chaos and embraces it. And you can start to look at his paintings. And I'm not sure if everyone knows his work or not, but Stephen, if you got a chance to just, I think it's agoodbrush.com.
Okay. Yeah.
You got to know Craig Mullins if you want to be a concept
Yeah.
artist.
Craig Mullins, again, like you said, legendary artist. The reason that it sounds familiar to you guys right now, if it does, is because we've mentioned it a bunch of times in videos, and you've heard all of your other favorite artists mention Craig Mullins.
Yeah, he's highly influential. So, Craig, when you look at his paintings, there's a ton of chaos in them, and he's letting his process show through, but he knows exactly where to put the information as he finishes things up, and it lets you see what he wants you to see. So he's starting chaotic. He's starting with, inference and kind of blocking things in with big brushes. He even starts like super low resolution digitally, because he was painting for years on, software and computers that just didn't have the bandwidth to handle the painting. So he'd start at 72 DPI and then blow those sketches up, continue to paint into them. And
honestly, it works.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, when you have a good value structure and actual strong work, seeing it at lower resolution, it still looks fantastic. Like, there's a reason if you look back at an old movie or something like that and you watched it on VHS, where it is in every way lower resolution, it still was a film. Like, it looked like a freaking film.
Yeah. Very cinematic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's just one of the examples I pull up all the time when I'm talking about this stuff, which is, how to control where the information goes. And it's a building process. He goes shadows, midtones, and lights. And in the lights, that's where the control comes in, and the shadows usually where the chaos lives. So that's just something to kind of think about with your process, that if you're working up in a traditional image making process, you're working that way. You're going oftentimes dark to light. You're going from low resolution to high resolution. You're going from shadows, dark to light, shadows to light. You're going cool to warm. You're going from thin to thick. Like, literally all of those things are happening at the same time. And once you understand that process, I call it like a value pyramid, then it just all starts to make so much more sense in your technique and your process.
There was one question here, and I figured I'd bring it up while we're still using it. So Gail asked, the gouache will ultimately flake off because it's on top of the acrylic, right?
No, it won't. Like, it's so thin. I mean, I've got paintings that have been around for as long as I've been painting. First of all, the acrylic that I'm using is not so thick. Like, it's still going to be some of the paper surface coming through. It's absorbed into it. But one thing to remember, Gail, that you've got the same pigment that is in all paints, and that always demystified the oil painting process to me. Is like, oh, they're oils, they're on a whole other level. It's like, no, they're still just the same pigment. What's changing is the binder. And when you get into, sorry, let me get my camera in focus here. Or DSLR, and it likes to cut off every 8 minutes. But when you get into something like that, the binder changes. So acrylic is using a plastic emulsion, and you've got casein and different mediums, and you've got linseed oil with oils. So a lot of it is just what's kind of liquefying or making the pigments viscous to kind of bind it to the support. So I've not seen that, and I don't think that that's a problem. Especially next, you'll see I'll kind of go back with this unbleached acrylic and paint back into the gouache too, so that further kind of seals it in. So, all right, real quick, let me do this while it's setting up here. Feel free to ask away, but let me explain. So I've got all this stuff, and it's pretty much dry now. So my acrylics are dry. This is a little wet. I won't touch it, but I've gone back and I'm a little off camera here. I've taken water and I've mixed the same acrylic paint and diluted it. And all I'm going to go do now is put some kind of washes over top of all of this. So it's the same color. And what it's doing is it's bringing those values closer together. So I'm unifying my shape. It's a shape welding exercise for those of you who are well-versed in concept art. And that's a very common term that comes up, like actually grouping your values together. So I'm going through that here, and it lets me clean up the edges on my hand and everything else. And now that edge of the hand reads the way that I kind of want it to. Same thing here. I'm going to bring these values into these shadows. And what you end up with is kind of a nice variety of what I think is somewhat of a fresh bit of mark making, right? So it's got marks within marks. Um, One of my instructors always said that you want to have a mature palette, so you have color within color. I think you can have a mature surface too, which is um, modulation variety within the actual surface itself.
I like this idea. I was reading through some of the comments here. There's one from a person who was saying that this is not a thing that you need to address, Sterling. They were saying that the painting window is blurry for them to watch. I think that you're looking at the middle of the character where there's the pencil lines that he then did go in and fuzz out with the initial wash. If you see any sort of like pixelation on like his hand or something, that might be just what your feed is right now. Try refreshing, changing the bit rate on your video. But as far as things go, this looks like his hand and everything is in focus. The tools around there, and it looks good.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I just didn't want them to think like, oh, it's bad, I'll never come back. No, watch this thing. Sterling's got wisdom for you.
Trying. All right, so another example here, like this shape is making the silhouette read more clearly now. I still have to bring things into it, but watch what happens with this hand here as I bring this darker value beneath it. It's going to start to read much more clearly as a silhouetted hand and not just, an angle up here. It's going to be a lot more clear just from this. My inclination in places like this is like, well, I've drawn it and I have the drawing where I want it to be. It's okay to cut into your own drawings. And even like this little detail, you'll see it here in a moment. I've got a line there and I'm going to paint outside it so that this actually reads as more of a highlight value, like a rim lighting on that finger. And that's just taking advantage of kind of the space where I don't paint. If that comes through, I don't know, but it makes sense in my own head.
We did get one question here in this chat. So Vopal, I'm going to go with that as the pronunciation, asks, what is the best replacement for illustration board? I can't find any. I think you should be able to bring this up. So that's the Strathmore 500 series illustration board.
Yeah.
It's pretty freely available. Try poking around, seeing if maybe something in Google is giving you some weird results or something. But if a person couldn't find something like that, would you recommend something else for them?
Well,
Bristol, it won't do the full job.
Yeah, Bristol's going to warp on you, right? Mm-hmm. So if you use Bristol, it's actually going to start to warp. And even this, right now, it's got a little buckle to it because it's evaporating. But you just don't want something to really turn for you. Then you got to scan it, and it's just, I don't know. This is just the stuff I found that works really well. I've used matte board before, and you can kind of get away with it, but you have to. I don't know. I seal slower. I might do 2 passes of the acrylic, so it buckles less. The problem with other boards are like hardboard from the hardware store. It doesn't take pencil the same way that this does. So this is a really nice drawing surface. But yeah, you can use Canson, you can use Bainbridge, you can use Strathmore. They all have an illustration board. You can always take a substrate and mount it to a more rigid board that's not going to warp too. So you can use some type of adhesive to do that. But yeah, apologies. I wish I knew something else. This is kind of one of those things that I found and I like and I use it because it works. And I just don't want to fight the support any more than I have to when I'm working.
Yeah, for a lot of you guys, so there's a person here in the chat said it's not very well available in Europe. That's fair. Yeah. See if there's maybe one from a different company, like Sterling had said, that might be pretty similar. But also experiment a little bit. similar to the thing from earlier about using stuff from the hardware store, sometimes you'll find something that works for you that you didn't expect to do that job.
100%.
Like the idea of mounting something to something that's a little bit more rigid, try that out, see what works.
Good advice. All right. So the big value stuff is kind of blocked in. The original had a cat up there, and I'm not just trying to emulate the original. I'm just trying to show you some painting techniques more than anything. But this is back to, I can't remember if it was Stacy or whoever asked me about the gouache flaking off and everything else. This is kind of where we're going to go back, and I don't know how. This is kind of like watching paint dry. This is literally like it's the tedium that kind of goes into it. But let me show you a few things here. Before I do that, let me jump in over here. I want to just kind of articulate between these fingers a little bit, because these values, again, are going to really help explain that hand. I went to a program called the Illustration Academy, which was run by John English, but it brought through just some of the best illustrators in the world. And they just really emphasized the importance of your silhouettes. So not shadows, we're not always talking about shadows with silhouettes, but your shapes, like this silhouette of that hand. The more information I bring into that, the more clarity it has, and the easier it is to read, right? So even like this outline is kind of going down to explain these fingertips, it's going to help visually explain what I want you to see in my shapes and my form. And you see, I've kind of moved down to a detail brush here. This is my script liner, because these are things where I want a little bit more nuance and subtlety.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So there's another question here. So Jeff asked, when experimenting with new materials, do you have specific requirements of your subject matter to test your ideas and techniques? I'm going to move that into like a place. I think of what they're trying to ask. Like, do you have any specific metrics you test for or common tests that you use?
I kind of just jump into things, honestly. And one of the things that I've been really grateful for as an illustrator is, yes, I have ways of working, but when you get into a really good relationship with art directors, they will trust you quite a bit. So I had some long-term relationships, like with the art director of Virginia Living Magazine. I worked with him for years, and I was kind of given a lot of freedom to go and experiment with materials, and the materials I use are always driven by an idea. Like I want it to do something. So typically I would experiment with the material. Like I'm pretty well versed in like acrylics by themselves. I'm well versed in watercolor by themselves, oils by themselves. And as you get to know these materials, you start to realize, like, oh, hey, this does something really interesting I didn't expect. So like oils, as an example, I love that you can have oils wet in a wet, and then drag a brush and go back over the same brush and see the sequence, because it kind of lifts and removes at the same time. It's hard to explain, but if I had oils out, I could show you very quickly.
I think the one thing to kind of compare it to is like, if like a thing that everyone I think has had with a jawbreaker, you see those layers, and if you kind of like, if you were to like lick off a jawbreaker that had just like a bite through it, you would still have that color push from each of those layers together, but you would be seeing what was underneath at the same time. Correct me, like if you feel anything wildly different than that.
No, and that's something that I love about oils, is just seeing color within color within color. For me, it's this is an idea that comes from Jackson Pollock, of all places. And you might love or hate Jackson Pollock's work, but I started studying Pollock not for his paintings, but because of some of the theory. And the theory was that, well, when he splashed paint, that, you know, it would record time and action in sequence. And if the paint moved this way, like an arrow, then you could see that the next splash of paint went over top of it. That same thing happens in your brush strokes with oils if you kind of let it happen. So especially wet into wet. So that's kind of at the heart of it. And that's just one example to back to the question of something that I love about oils, that I can find ways of saying, well, that works in oils. Can I marry that with something else in a different material? And then you start to realize that each material has a mood, it has a tone, it has a certain quality to it that other materials can't do. And that's where you kind of invite them to the party, right? So that's my thinking when I'm experimenting with stuff, is like, no, I want this medium to do a certain thing. Um, Stephen, to put it back into the world of digital, it's like being, a producer or something, and like, well, I need to develop a 3D model. It's like, well, I'm going to go to Maya, or I'm going to do it in Blender, or I'm going to do it in something else. And they all have their own quirks and properties and strengths. And some of them work great in the pipeline that kind of goes to the next thing. Some of them, like ZBrush or Mudbox or whatever it is. These are things that have their own quirks and strengths, and you end up picking them because they help amplify your message. So that's what leads my experimentation, is like, I got somewhere that I want to go as an idea, and then I like, well, this medium will help me get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. I think you use the tool that you want for the job that it's best at.
Right.
I think, okay. For a second there, the webcam was kind of blurry. I think it sorted itself out. So we have a couple other questions here. There is one from Noah who's asking, when you work from life, what kind of consideration do you give to structure and theory as compared to the character of what you're looking at? I think you have something in particular that you are currently selling on Proko that might address a little bit of that.
Yeah. Well, when you get into your idea development, so there's to address that question, there is the studio practice, which is to actually work with ideas, and to go back to your studio, you have the quiet and the sanctity of working at home. I'm also somebody who just believes that artists are meant to make art about a life well lived, and to document the time in which they live. I started a whole program years ago called Legendeer, and we would take artists out to Banff and Yosemite and Zion. We went rock climbing, we went whitewater rafting. And the whole idea was this idea of the embedded artist, where we would go do things that were, story worthy and show people how to capture them in film and story and illustration. But all of it, it's like this breathing process where you have to go back into the studio at some point and have the quiet and the sanctity of working, if you're going to kind of structure and build on things that push beyond the observed. So I've got there's in my mind, it's a process, right? So when I observe, and when I document, I document. I'm not really, if I'm out doing a live event or something like that where I'm drawing from life, I'm going to just as efficiently capture the moment as well as I possibly can. Then when I go back and I think about things, I can bring in theory and ideation and everything else. Then I can choose the right material, the right composition, the right design, the right pairing, the right messaging. So I would just encourage, if you're thinking about those things, theory versus observed, it's really hard to tap into both at the same time, and be okay with separating those out, that they can live in different steps in your process.
Yeah, I think go get that life experience, but bring it back.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the life experience. Like I make art, so I have an excuse to go do cool stuff.
I definitely find myself doing the same kind of thing sometimes.
Yeah. So live a rich life and tell stories about it. That's our job.
The thing that I alluded to a little bit ago was that a lot of that, like taking the things that you learned, mixing those with your experiences, and then prioritizing the technical rigidity of something versus the story that you want to tell, is something that I believe that Sterling is tackling pretty well in his course that's new to Proko over at proko.com/ideacraft. Sterling, I don't know if you want to say anything in particular about what you do, but I think the way that I've chosen to look at it is that for all of those people who have already taken plenty of other courses, whether that's like in person, digitally, or if you've just learned how to make art through the rigors of life, sometimes it can be hard to pull yourself back from the idea of communicating accurate light and shadow and form, and just making something that's interesting to see. So like Sterling wonderfully came to us with this idea of us having this course of his that would teach you that. Where I think a lot of times the people on Proko, they're mostly getting that technical education. Having something like this seems like a really nice idea.
Well, I appreciate you saying it. And that's kind of anytime that you're doing something and you're trying to work with folks, it's like, where are you going to bring value? And everything that Steve and y'all are doing with Proko is obviously immensely impactful. It's been very well received, and some of this is like, okay, well, then the question is like, what's next? What do you do with those skills? And for some, that's what they want to do. They want to do accurate academic paintings and drawings and kind of build on things and learn those foundations. And you should absolutely learn those things first as you're kind of building. But then, you have to remember that drawing is, I like to think of it as thinking out loud. And there's a whole process where, we can aspire to bring value to products, to services, to games, to film. I'm doing a lot of work in engineering and in the hospitals now where I'm the guy in the room who can draw things that people are talking about.
Mm.
And that has tremendous value. We're working on a series of storyboards right now for nonverbal and neurodivergent patients and who are going into surgery. And the doctors have this idea, the surgeons do, and we're actually coming up with a visual communication that speaks louder than words. Like
nice.
And so there's just so many opportunities to use your work. And that's really what IdeaCraft is about, is building a process and a pipeline so you can work with clients, you can author your own projects and opportunities. And I don't care if it's entertainment or if it's actually something where you're trying to bring value to quote unquote non-creative industries.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that we have to remember that drawing is, again, it's thinking out loud, but it's also it's communication. It's one of the most fundamental ways that we actually can relay information and cut across language barriers, time, different years, different points of view. It's just a tremendous value in the world that I think has been kind of pushed into just the entertainment arts and fine arts. And it's like, no, we got to bring it back to these larger conversations where artists are at the table with the policymakers and the engineers, the scientists, especially as the technology is moving at such a fast pace.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that clarifies a little bit.
Yeah, no, very much so. I think, yeah, like that focus on the fact that art is communication. It doesn't have to be just limited to making the coolest dude for the newest video game.
Which is cool too.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Also great. This is also communication. Yeah. Vopal in the chat asked, how do people who hire illustrators react if they know that you learn only online? Does it matter? No. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could, like, it could be that you went to the greatest atelier that people line up at the base of a mountain and wait 10 years to go and learn from a master who will teach only one person at a time. If you don't make something that looks good, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, 100%. It's always about your portfolio. And keep in mind, I'm a professor in communication arts. So we are essentially the illustration department. I teach seniors who are leaving to go out in the market. I teach professionals, and it's always about the work that you show. 100%. Like, no one cares who you are, what you look like, where you are. Those things have zero. They don't factor into it at all. Mm-hmm. And your degree, like my students are kind of shocked to say this. Your degree doesn't matter. No one's going to look at your whether you went to this college or you went to SCAD or MIT. I shouldn't say no one. Mm-hmm. There are pipelines that lead into industry for sure. But yeah. But it still comes back to, if you can have the the best look on paper for your degree and everything else. But if you've got a portfolio that's not up to the industry standard, then that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. It can sound really cool to someone when you go show up somewhere, and it could be like a certain stamp or mark of time put in. If you say that you went to somewhere like SCAD, and learned from there, they expect a certain level of quality to have come out of there. And so that might get someone to pay a little bit more attention and allow you to hand their portfolio over to them. But then you only stand to disappoint them if you don't have work that's up to that quality level. So it can be just as big of a detriment sometimes.
Yeah.
There was another one here. So I think their name is Dr. Dupe. They said, just wondering what's the major difference between the Proko course and those at IdeaCraft? Anything new that's not in that one or the other course? Thanks.
Great question. Yeah, we actually worked really hard. I went back and remastered the lessons. I have voiceovers in the demonstrations. The assignment demonstrations. There's so every assignment, I think every assignment, we've got a working process where I'm trying to show and tell. And in IdeaCraft, I was just kind of showing. I wasn't telling. And then there's 7 new demonstrations, like 7 totally new demonstrations that I haven't shown before that are available through Proko. And that's just for even people who've taken IdeaCraft before. We're trying to figure out how to make that the most value to you. It's like, well, you can actually buy just part 2, and that includes those 7 new demos, and they really complement the lessons. Orientation week 1, building from mark making, tool selection to value, landscape, working with character kind of layout and design, up to a full pen and ink demonstration. There's a digital painting in there, and so just a number of things that are that just go deeper into the lessons that we have. I really appreciate that question. I don't know if you've been through IdeaCraft through Gumroad or not, but I just keep, every time I release something, that what else can I bring to it to make it better than it was?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you guys want that, you can get that at the link in the description, in the chat here, or this one that I am showing on screen right now, if you want to type that yourself. Let's see. We have some other questions here. Well, there's a comment. S. Merck in the chat said, take the course. You won't regret it.
Hey, Mark, what's up, buddy? Thanks for doing it, man.
And let's see what else we have. Okay. So
let me switch gears just for a second here. I'm going to start painting into this with the paint. So right now I've got these subtle values, and I'm going to go back with this acrylic paint. I just want to get to this before I lose people's attention. This is the same unbleached titanium white that I'm going to go into and paint into the gouache here, and hopefully you'll see I can start building up my values lighter and warmer, but because they're mixing with the gouache, it's actually going to have a temperature shift to it too, and it'll give me a variety of colors kind of going on the skin tone. So that's what's happening next here. Sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're doing the right thing. They're here to learn this thing, not to just have me pontificate on YouTube questions. Yeah. Do you think that this was the way that you're building up with the medium right now? Do you think that it's something that you did from when you first started working, or do you think it's something that you learned over time and that added to your process?
Oh, totally. I had to learn it. So I was so hungry for techniques when I was a student. I was a total illustration geek. I was as into it as you can get into things. And I learned them all. Like, there's not I'm sure there's techniques I don't know, but everything that was available, I was really seeking them out. And only after I learned them was I able to start kind of blending things together, and figuring out my own kind of technique and process. And they became shortcuts. They're really, it just makes sense to take this step away and add this thing in. Oh, I found this color and I like this color. So let me explain that for a second, because the materials you use, the way that you draw, the way that you structure things, the way that you ideate, these are all things that this is your style. Like, what is style? Well, style is keeping the good stuff, getting rid of the bad stuff, but it takes time. And if you're looking to develop something unique and distinct, you have to make a lot of mistakes to work through it. So that's the way I learned materials and tools and everything else. Um, Kind of put these things together and it's like, oh, this just makes sense for my mind, the way I work. And I've got all these different techniques. I have things that I invented where I work on packaging tape, and it's a signature look for me at this point, but something I invented because it made sense at the time to work in layers that way. So,
Mm.
all these things are, they're waiting for you to be discovered by each of you. What amplifies your voice the most clearly and the best?
Mhm. Two questions about the course that you can find at proko.com/ideacraft in the description.
I'm listening. I
Uh,
guess I can grab a brush. I'm listening.
okay, yeah. So two questions about that. Kat asked, by remastering, do you mean that you redid the lessons? And then Ace Ghost asked, do you need specific art supplies for the course?
So the first thing, I went back, Kat, there's a lot of lessons that I went back and redid. There are resolution issues that I didn't realize I had going on. Some of them are new lessons that are in there. I don't want to overpromise and overdeliver. I think there's a lot of the structure that's the same to what you had before, if you've been through it. But new assignments are going to go up in, or a new project list is going to go up in part 2 as well. So if you've been through it before, my advice is to kind of go back and, like, if you want to do it, do part 2. That's really kind of why we built it that way, is to kind of look into that. I don't think it's going to be repetitive information. That a couple things you've seen before, but for the most part, it's new stuff. And that's what I would suggest, is just sticking to that. I think that's going to give you the most for your money and for your time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the second question, sorry, I forgot it.
Oh, so the second one was, do you need specific art supplies for the course?
If you want to emulate what I'm doing, but remember the foundation of the course, even though I've got digital techniques, I've got acrylic techniques, they all build on each other. If you go to that IdeaCraft page, I've got this processional kind of demonstration thing, which I think a lot of art students, like, they get really excited about. Like, I want to learn techniques, and I've got a ton of techniques in there, but they all build on each other. So you learn mark making, then you learn composition, and you kind of work all the way through to some mixed media pieces, which is going to be very similar to what I'm showing you today on that side. But my intention with the class is to teach you how to ideate, to come up with ideas. So if you've ever just struggled, like, I don't know what to paint today, and it's not, I'm going to go paint something I can observe. I want to work from my imagination. I want to develop a workflow that relates to professional industry, so I can build a portfolio that has value to art directors, and I can work in gaming or illustration or animation or design. It all starts with ideation. And I'm such a huge proponent of developing powerful ideas that are worth your time to paint. So that's really the crux of it, is tons of things that show you materials. If you went through it with just a pencil and you just wanted to ideate, you'd be good. You'd be, or a tablet, or whatever it is. You could just have a sketchbook, and I think you would still get a ton out of the class, because now you know how to visually communicate through pictures.
Nice. I would put that on the tin. That goes on the dust jacket. Yeah, for any of you guys who haven't gotten to check it out or anything, which I highly recommend. Listen, they don't pay me more for more courses that people buy. There's a really good breakdown on that course page, proko.com/ideacraft, that takes you through what all is included in there. Some of those things might be those additional things that people who are talking about having taken the course before, they're asking if there's more in there. And there's also just a bunch of stuff on the front of that course page that I don't think oftentimes gets included when you go to look at a course to see if it's something you're interested in. One thing that I definitely want to mention that's in there is that it is a 6-week guided program. Like, that's just mentioned on there. A lot of times people wonder, like, how long will it take me to do this thing? Is it going to be too little or too much? It's just right there for you. And there's the little diagram that you've got that actually shows what you will build with as you learn. I think all of those things are very handy if you guys are wondering if this course is right for you.
Well, appreciate it. I love teaching, and as a professor, like, I want to be really clear with outcomes and what's it worth for your time. One of the things that you all know is true on the internet is like it's the Wild West. You can go study with so many people, and
Mhm.
you go through and it's like, well, I can learn this technique and I can learn this technique, and now I can copy this person's work. And it's like, well, having structure and time, like like what I've tried to build in it is imagine 6 weeks of a college course where you're trying to find how to develop ideas and techniques to manifest your ideas. And as you go through that, I try to give ample time for, okay, here's your assignment for this day. And, this is orientation week is kind of pretty intensive with techniques and like little minor projects, like 1 hour, 1.5 hour technical things. And then we get into here's an actual list of different projects that you could do, or you can build your own. And I teach you how to do that.
Mhm.
These are major projects, and they take, you'll take a week and work on just composition design and thumbnailing. And then week 4, you've gone through 3 major projects. You choose one, and that's when the techniques start. And I show you how to take one from idea to finished illustration. So hopefully you end up with a portfolio piece from one of those sketches that you've spent all that time on, or one sketch, but many sketches. So it's an entire pipeline for illustration from ideation all the way to technique on how to make things.
Mhm. Speaking of portfolios, Vopal in the chat asked, "Are we able to send portfolios to Sterling once we have one?" Is that something that you'll be doing in any way in feedback, or would like anywhere else, or
Um,
is this more self-guided?
it's self-guided, but I'm pretty available. So yeah, I don't want to offer something and then let somebody down because I forgot, or
Yeah.
it fell into my email thread. So again, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but um, Merck is here. He knows we go back and forth. He was a student and just become a friend of mine here. I try to be accessible, and things fall through the cracks. So
Mhm.
if you've got a portfolio and it's connected to the class and you've done something that you're looking to get feedback on, um, track down my email, reach out to me. I've got other things I don't want to
Yeah, yeah.
plug them here, but yeah, it's
I mean, you can. We're okay with you talking about where else you have a course or your website or anything. That's entirely fine.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I will be running workshops. I have other things. I've got idea craft, voice, and vision, and they all build on each other. And I'd love to one day down the road with you guys do a live workshop, but right now those kind of take place in the summer,
Yeah.
and those are going to be things that kind of give you the opportunity to sit through critiques and live paint overs and everything else. And those are obviously a good bit more expensive than this, but
Yeah.
that's where I kind of do it outside of the university where I teach. So that's kind of how I'd frame that. But thank you,
Okay.
Steve. I just didn't want
Yeah.
to lead people away.
No, it's totally fine. Yeah, I think it would be crazy for us to pretend like no people can't learn art anywhere else on here.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like they're watching this on YouTube, and in the column next to us is the next 30 possible YouTube tutorial videos for them. Like
right.
those exist.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the thing.
I
Real quick,
did.
I'm
Go
going
ahead.
to bring this close to the camera and see if it zooms for us. But um, let me see if I can get it to refocus here.
If you want, you can actually hold this up to your face cam.
Okay, let
I
me
can
try.
solo that if you feel a little bit better about the fidelity of that one.
Yeah, that one's a little sharper, isn't it? Let's see if that. Hold on, it's got some wet paint, so it's going to drip. Give me a second here.
Yeah.
It's still probably going to drip, but I'll salvage it. That's okay. Let's see.
Okay. Okay.
Anyways, that's a little bit more in focus. Yeah, you can start to see a little bit of the subtlety in the color.
Mhm.
The webcam's not doing a great job of, but we're working with what we got here.
Yeah. I think, like, honestly, if the work is shining through any sort of, like, technical hurdles or anything like that, or, like, through, like, an old quality phone video ever, it just speaks to the quality of the art. I don't know about you, one thing that I like to do is kind of, I'll take a picture of my work, the thing that I'm making that I think is pretty much done, take a picture of it, and then hold it at, like, arm's length, and then look at the thing, if it reads well like that, that's pretty much how someone else is going to view it.
Yeah. Good
Because
point.
they weren't there for the making of it process. They don't know that you had this one little misplaced stroke or anything.
Yeah, and it gives you some separation, some distance from it, which is always good. You can also look at things in a mirror, right?
Mhm.
That's the same thing where it's like it looks like someone else made it. Like, whoa.
It's like, oh man, they really messed up that shoulder over there.
But
Wait, that was me.
yeah, I literally had that happen with a piece where it's like I'm drawing it just like the photograph, and it does not look right. And I had to completely change the design of a certain piece because it was just, yeah, it just the design needed. And I know that sounds weird. We always assume that photography is right, but then you learn about camera length, the camera lenses,
Mhm.
distortion, and it's like, oh, it's not always telling the truth. So
We actually have a video about that. Not to share anything from anybody else, but Patrick Jones did a whole free video with us about that exact topic.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
It's good.
it was a really fraught comment section. A lot of people were saying, "No, this is exactly how this leg would be," and it's like, yes, I understand, but no, there's some distortion happening with the wide angle lens.
Yeah, yeah.
Just as another answer to that person who was asking about the portfolio thing earlier, if you guys do go and leave any sort of comments, post things that you made as part of an assignment on a course on Proko, while there are some instructors who are able to give time to be able to go through those things, not every instructor is. And we do have actual incredibly well-informed artists who do nothing else on Proko except go around and give critiques and feedback on things that people have posted, whether that's someone just hopping through and saying like, I did this anime fan art, I like it, look at it. Or if someone's submitting something for an assignment that they did do, they'll get feedback and like some pretty intense critiques on there, depending on what the person is looking for. So don't be afraid to share something, even if you don't see Sterling replying that day.
Yeah, and I'm also cognizant this is going up on the internet for forever,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to say
sign yourself up for 20 years of feedback.
exactly. So, so you have to be cautious with that, but at least for now, I really like just kind of. I've got a few people kind of coming to my instructors page, and I'm paying attention because I'm there right now. So if you've got things like if you decide to do this demo, you want to share it. It's just kind of it's fun to see, and sometimes I share them back out, and so that's a good place to kind of begin with this. Touch on this real quick. You can't see it again a whole lot here, but like I keep building up these values. So it's getting thicker and thicker. And as it does, it gets warmer because it's back to the pure value here and it's not mixing so much. So I'm starting to get a buildup on the forehead that in person, and even if I were to scan it, I like a good bit more. And there's a lot of glazing here. So whoever struggled with this technique before, you have to understand that it's like there is a nuance to it. You have to kind of keep nursing this thing a little bit to build it up because the acrylic's dry and they go dead, and you have to kind of building them back up. So that's one thing that might be helpful if you end up trying this technique at home.
S. Merck in the chat said, "Sorry, I was just driving to the local Blick to pick up some more unbleached titanium white." Yeah,
that's the stuff, man. That's the stuff. It's funny. I'm such a proponent of FW white ink. I was, my social following is down. I kind of left social media during COVID, and I came back, and at that time I was talking about this FW ink, and someone's like, "Are you sponsored by Dale Rowney?" I was like, "No," and then their rep kind of came on and said, "Hey, reach out to us," and they ended up picking me up as a sponsor. So it was kind of whoever that person was, I owe you a thank you for that. Dale Rowney was watching. So
yeah, it's always fun, those kind of things where it's like no, really, I'm just recommending them because they're good. But
yeah,
that can become an actual real working relationship.
no, it's cool. It's nice when it happens that way.
Yeah. So always ask about all of the supplies. Everybody wants that sponsorship money.
There you go. There you go.
But
yeah, I'm building up in the shadows a little bit here, and you can kind of see that I like what that edge did kind of on my beard and everything else. So I'm starting to like some of the painting here. Now I don't say that with ego. that's what you're trying to do as an artist. You're like, I'm going to paint it until I like it, right? And that's one thing that a beginner and the most seasoned pro, they all have in common. We paint until we don't know what else to do. Like, I don't know how to make it any better. So
That's the like a painting is never finished. It's just like taken away from you.
there you go, especially on deadlines, right? Especially with client work.
Let's see. I did. There was a question earlier from Jocelyn right at the top of the stream who had asked, what are some must-read books for illustrators?
Gosh.
It's okay to not have an answer for the thing also.
Well, I would tell you some of the things that I absolutely love. I was challenged to teach a concept art course, and this is kind of my full disclosure with my art education. I went to the university where I teach years ago, and I had one professor who was just tremendous, and his name was Robert McGank. Is Robert McGank? I'll check him out. He's a really cool illustrator, dear friend of mine. But there was also a lot of information that kind of came through the school that just wasn't true. It wasn't accurate, and I grew a little bit disenfranchised with my art education. So I decided to go out there and see what else there was, and I found my way to this program called the Illustration Academy, which I mentioned before, and it was life changing. I went out to Kansas City, and I studied with John English and Mark English and Gary Kelly and a bunch of, I'm not trying to name drop, these people became friends and just mentors in the most sincere way. But gosh, I'm on a tangent here. I forget what the question was. Sorry.
About the books. It might have been you might have been going through the people that influenced you in a big way.
Well, so the book, I because of that experience, I was always gun shy about misleading students. I felt like there was information I got that just was not true. And they asked me at the university to teach a concept design class. And my solution to that was like, well, I'm not a concept artist, but I would like to be. And I started putting my portfolio together, and I went out and I became a concept artist. I worked on a film project, and just really wanted to teach from a place of applied information. All that to say, I went back and I fell in love with Scott Robertson's How to Draw book, because I had a refresh on perspective. I have, I'm drawing a complete blank right now. Sid Mead. I keep thinking Cy Twombly. Sid Mead's book blows my mind every time I look at it. I've got a fantastic book over here called Framed. I'm forgetting the illustrator, but it's a wonderful composition book. But I tell you, that Scott Robertson book, I'm wearing it out. I geeked out so much about perspective drawing, and I love it. If y'all want like the man when it comes to perspective drawing, take Marshall's class. He and I taught together years ago, and he's put together a tremendous perspective class as well. So I just when it comes to reading, I've read so many things, fiction and historical information, artists' lives, bios, that had nothing to do with illustration and had to do with art history and who was making what when. And a general rule of thumb is, if there's a really famous artist and I'm like, I don't get it, I don't see why everyone loves their work. Who is this Manet guy? Who is this Van Gogh guy? Who's Kathy Kolovich, who is undeniable as a talent. But I assume the problem is me and not them. And I go and I read about their lives. And I've fallen in love with so many, not the artwork, but like why they did what they did, the theory behind it has been immensely powerful. I mean, this piece is directly influenced by Picasso and Cubism. Right?
Okay, I can see this.
It was on my mind. Like I have to show the record player and I have to show his face all at the same time. How do I break reality? Well, Picasso's the guy, right? So anyways, I hope that answers your question. It gives you something to work with there.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that the idea of getting something from another illustrator or artist in any way It doesn't necessarily just have to be limited to technique, you know?
Right. Right.
Um, so Volpel in the chat was asking, what was that book on composition? Is there any chance that's Framed Ink?
That's it. Yep.
Okay, yeah, Framed Ink, and it looks like that one is by uh, Marcos Mato Mestre,
Yes, that's it.
and I am not gonna try to pronounce that better. Yeah,
Well,
Framed Ink was that one.
I can't correct you, but it's gorgeous. I mean, just beautiful compositional studies, and um, like I got that maybe 4 months ago, and so even now, having been doing this for many years, I'm always a student, and I'm always learning, and you know, I think that if I had to kind of tell a story of myself when I was younger, kind of ego gets in the way. It's like, well, I'm doing this on my own, and um, in reality, you do nothing on your own. But I I fought some fights that had already been fought,
Mm.
and like,
Like, do you think in learning art?
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Like, it's like I got to just do it and do it and do it, and then it's like, oh, I thought I had this original idea, and I found that this was, a French painter from, you know, the early 1800s had already touched on all this. So I just reading, it's good.
Yeah, no, I definitely, we've all been there, and you're like, you've come up with something, and you're like, you've been doing it for long enough that you start trying to like find the name of the thing that you're gonna call this new technique that you've invented,
Yeah,
and then you describe it to someone else, and they're like, oh no, yeah, that's this. You're like,
exactly. Like symbiotics, it's
but
like
yeah,
just comparing to contrasting symbols and elements, and these bridge building, like symbiotics. Yeah,
I thought my name was good too,
yeah. But it's I used to put this really unrealistic pressure on myself. It's like I want to be an original, right?
Mm,
And I think it's possible to be an original to a certain degree, but I like the word, authentic. It's overused these days, but like I define authentic as being like you found your way to it on your own. Like you can be, it can be original to you, I guess is kind of what I'm trying to say.
yeah, yeah. I
Um,
think oftentimes, I don't know if you ever struggled with it in your search for originality and being the first Sterling Hundley rather than being, like the new Van Gogh. Um, Oftentimes people struggle with this idea of doing something that is entirely new. It's totally okay to be a Venn diagram of the things that you like and enjoy visually and enjoy doing manually. Even if you try to go and copy exactly the art from another artist that you liked and you only wanted to be that one artist, chances are it's going to be changed and modified when it gets passed through you.
100%. In fact, I'm copying myself, which I swore I would never do.
Ooh, that's true.
And it's like I couldn't do it again. Like it's those things that when you're going through a process, I couldn't do a master copy of my own painting if I wanted to. Like I don't have the patience, I don't have the memory. So you are unpacking things through master studies that it's always a learning experience. And yeah, Stephen, to that point, man, I have this story. I had this friend of mine that I grew up with, and we we used to go to these comic conventions. That was my first love, was comics.
Hmm.
And they would have these art contests, and this dude would win every single time, even as like a 12, 13 year old. And he could copy things, and they would look exactly like the source. And I would see that and be like, yeah, that's cool, but I want to do something original, and I want to do something of my own. So I always push towards that. And I think that net benefit has been that I did find things that are unique to me. None of them are without influence. They're all influenced by something. But you have these epiphanies while you're painting. You're not just thinking about the thing. Your mind is wandering. You're solving problems. Uh, your mind is in 1,000 different places. And in that mindset, in that flow state, things break loose. Like, oh, that's interesting. I discovered something, and it's a eureka, aha moment. And I think I live for those as a painter, really.
Mhm. I while you described this, I did not know this about you, Sterling, that you had enjoyed comics in this way. So I asked the people in the chat what their favorite comics were. I'm curious what they'll say, because I think oftentimes, like you said, those things will inform your art. Uh, I've I always like asking because you get a different answer if you're in the comic shop buying comics versus talking to a group of artists who are looking to make physical, like actual art things with this.
Right.
Uh, what were some of your favorite comics, and was it more for the visual aspect or the storytelling aspect?
Uh, it started with visuals, and my guy was Todd McFarlane, right?
Mm.
Loved Todd's work, and I had a student who went to work for Todd at his toy company, and I was like, "That's the coolest thing ever." Uh, but yeah, Todd was like, even the way I draw fingers and stuff. Like I don't think about it, but I'm sure that it's been heavily influenced by Spider-Man, and you can almost see like the web slinging. So that was huge. Akira changed my life.
Yeah, Otomo. Yeah.
I've got those originals here. I've got X-Men, all the superhero stuff, Captain America, but then I got into like Sandman, and love Sandman and the writing in Sandman. Mouse is a phenomenal read.
Mhm.
Just so I think as I grew and changed, things are my taste changed as well. Now it's like I'm such a big fan of Mignola, and we've had a chance to kind of talk a little bit, and that was just a real joy for me. And I love his design and his pace and everything else with what he's doing. Raphael Grandpa did
Yeah.
Mesmo Delivery, which is like sick and twisted, and I love it. And it's Paul Pope, I think,
Absolutely.
Batman Year 100 was just incredible. So yeah, across the board. I mean, I don't collect them the way I used to. I
Yeah.
want to make my own comics, and I fell into other things, but still the smell of comics and ink on paper, it still just gets my heart racing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do like that. So if I was to compare the work that you're making right now with any of those, I think this would the work that I associate with you would most fall into a Sandman territory. I
Mm.
think because of the multimedia nature of it.
Yeah, Dave McKeon, and yeah, Dave, phenomenal artist. If y'all don't know Dave's work too, you got to check Dave out. He did all the original covers, and yeah, just all that mixed media stuff that you're talking about with digital and everything else. Stephen is kind of his jam for sure. So, this I know this is kind of uninteresting to watch, but this is
No.
I hate to say that this is what it is, and this is the process. I did the darks because I wanted you to see some of this, but there's things in here that I really enjoy, and that's what you're looking for in your process, is to find those little things like hard edges versus soft edges, right? So very traditional, important things in any type of painting and image making. Like, you can't see this, but like, I'm going to run this highlight down this finger. I like this sharp edge right here, and I've just got diluted unbleached titanium white, and I'm going to run that gradient down. And as it goes down, it's more intense, and it gets less intense as the paint falls off. Just super like little detailed things that I can tell you, but it will not make any sense to you until you paint and you get into it. Like, oh, I found this thing, and that's kind of a cool thing. I like that technique, and I'm going to use it again. So anyways, hope that makes sense.
It's just like the adding highlights. There's that certain, like, the very specific joy of finishing a piece and going in to put the catch in the eye,
Yeah.
the highlight white. It's oof. It's like it's right up there with the paint peel or the tape peel on a painting.
It is. It's the star on top of the Christmas tree. It's like we're done. It's like,
Yeah.
and it's when that's like the trusting the process to know that you will get to a place where all the struggles and all the underpainting and everything else is building to that. That's the leap of faith where you all need instructors. That's the thing where you're like, oh, I'm struggling, and I don't, I screwed it up. You're gonna have an instructor who looks at and be like, you're good, like that. That's the process. You stopped too soon.
Mhm.
You know, so all that stuff to me is um, where a mentor, a teacher, kind of comes in because they have the experience to kind of walk you through it.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Absolutely. So we did people. I let them stack up here from people's favorite comics. Would you like to hear any of these?
I would love to hear them. Yeah,
All right. So we got Volpel saying that they started with manga. They said like recently they started going through manga. They talked about Battle Angel Alita, but their favorite is a newer Doctor Strange comic. It seems, or they just mean new, like Doctor Strange as a newer thing as opposed to Alita.
that's
So it's fair. There's one here. It says Iwanda Magere. I think I tried googling here to see if it was a specific version of this, of a comic with this character. That's what I'm imagining, but yeah, this is like a folklore character. The Mobius 2-issue Silver Surfer set, very
okay.
good.
Yes,
If you guys are a fan of this, check out the more recent Trad Moore Silver Surfer Black. Is really psychedelic, very good, very much in the vein of that kind of story. We got Captain Waffle saying Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers.
man, he's
Absolutely,
just crushing it right now. I'm
it's
excited for him. You know,
it's wild and couldn't be a nicer guy.
yeah, he seems to be genuine. So I've not met him. I've just seen YouTube clips and or Instagram clips and things like that. But yeah, so,
If you'd ever be interested in reaching out to him, just go for it.
okay.
He'll reply. He's a sweetheart.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed. I mean, I see why he's having the success that he's having. It's his work is very personal, very good. But good is such a hard qualifier
Mhm.
because we assume that there's a standard. It's like no, the things that are good are when people find something that they're doing that's just unlike things we've seen before, and that freshness, that novelty of it, it moves away oftentimes from our academic understanding of accuracy and everything else. So yeah, I'm really stoked for that dude, man.
Mhm. We got Matthias Bergara for Coda. They're saying gorgeous work. Again, I think of a thing that would work for fans of Mobius.
Mobius has had such an influence, uh,
Very much so.
just on so many. I don't mean on me per se, but just on so many things. Oh gosh, Jeff Darrow,
Mhm.
huge influence. Hard boiled, you know, again, just a deeply disturbing um, comic for to read through, but really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes that's one of those things that I think can make a work that much better. It's just that story. Even though it's a comic and it's a visual medium, you
Yeah.
still need to have a good story.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I say that, but then I will say we're both fans of Paul Pope here, but Battling Boy wasn't exactly deep storytelling, but it's a good comic. I enjoy it.
Yeah. Then you got like a painter like Phil Hale, who's got Johnny Bad Hair and stuff like that. And
Mm,
Phil Hale's a brilliant painter, and as deep as they come, and that's more of a pop culture thing. And I just can't we do both? Can't we do smart things and fun things, and they don't all have to be heady. They don't all have to be super refined. Like those things can live in the same artist for sure. So, um,
absolutely. Yeah, I'll finish up. So my personal favorite, I'm gonna skip some in the chat here. For me, my recent favorite comic, that would be Ultra Mega from James Herron. It mixes all the things that I like while still having some good themes in there, and just chef's kiss art. Um, but all of these things to say that even though like Sterling is doing something that could feel to some people like this, like more like fine artsy kind of thing, comics for like one influence his work, and two, this can be in comics, guys.
yeah,
Whatever it is that you do in art, all of that fits into other mediums. You could be making art like this, and you could do stuff like you were talking about, where you're helping to communicate with nonverbal people going into medical situations. This could be a person doing something for concepts for a video game. It could be you like helping some company that has all these different like logo designs, and you're like, no, that one reads terribly because of this and this.
yeah.
Art is communication.
It is, and like we haven't gotten into this. So I'm a professor. I'm an illustrator, but this stuff that I'm doing in the hospital, I've got a grant that I'm waiting to hear back on. I've proposed building a holodeck for all the virtual set production stuff that we want to do it for kids who are in long-term care at the hospital. And
Mm, mm.
I think we're going to get it, knock on wood. But I've partnered up with a guy from the game industry, Jason Bennett, and he's fantastic, very talented. He does photogrammetry, but all this stuff starts with like, here's the pitch, and here's a drawing of a kid in this holodeck, and it starts with the idea of like, let's use these different language systems to flesh out opportunities and think about how to use technology in new spaces. But it's always drawing. Let me, if I can share another story real quick.
Yeah.
Just so same guy. We get invited to go to NASA, and this was totally volunteer. Somebody I knew that I was down documenting the SpaceX launch of the unmanned Dragon crew years ago, and met a bunch of scientists. And anyways, long story short, we got invited to go to NASA Langley, and we sat in this room. We were invited to take part in designing this drone challenge course, autonomous drones. And they're like, oh, the VCU team can make like floats and these obstacles and duct tape and sticking things together. Well, we were in this meeting, and there were probably 40, 50 people in there, and all these different people from different backgrounds, and aviators and engineers and scientists. And we were just talking. And then at some point I got up, they had this idea, and I was like, well, does it look like this? And I drew it on the board. And like, you would think the story is like, oh, like you got up and showed them something they were thinking of, like, no, that's not it. That's not it. And then I was like, well, what about this? And I showed him something else, and like, no, that's not it. And then my colleague Jason riffs off that, and he gets up and he draws a smiley face, and they literally go, we've never thought of it that way before.
Interesting.
And we instantly they said, well, let's take the Virginia Tech budget, cut it in half, and bring in the VCU team to work on this. So we went from like, we made an opportunity because we were drawing, and I got shot down and he got the praise. But it was all because we could get to hard no's and hard yeses because we were drawing. So it's just cool. I mean, it's fun stuff.
I've talked about it before, but there's this thing that I think there's a technique that I developed that is like you said earlier, it's a pre-existing technique, obviously. But when my girlfriend says that she wants to go get dinner somewhere, I will start suggesting something to her, and chances are I'm never going to say the right thing. Like I'll start by saying specific restaurants, and then I'll start saying like spicy, sweet, crunchy, or anything. I'm not trying to find the actual solution or right answer. I'm trying to work her through all of the no's, so she knows what a yes looks like by like finding that negative space in there.
Funny. That's a good technique.
I'm never gonna get the right answer, man. I'm just gonna help her find what she doesn't want.
Yeah, I'm gonna set it up for no's, and then we'll kind of shepherd our way into it. That's good.
But yeah, this also works for art. I do like that you basically went up there, and it was like the what's that? The Goodwill Hunting moment, he's like the janitor in the school. He walks up there and he starts like doing the math. You're like, and they walk by, they're like, oh my God, he solved it. Yeah. Like you went up there in this way, and they walked up and they went, this guy's terrible at math.
This guy's a janitor. Exactly. But look, I mean, putting yourself in a situation where you're willing to fail. I mean, I'm not bashful about any of that stuff. And very, very often it works out. And more often than not, I fail, but every once in a while I'll be like, yeah, let's do it. And so anyways, it was really cool. I love that story because it just kind of shows that we were able to demonstrate both ends of it, that this works and that doesn't. And so anyways, fun stuff.
Yeah, these are all valid problem solving techniques. Yeah. So when you get to this kind of spot in a piece, so for some people, this could be as far as they ever take the work. right? Like this could be entirely publishable if they were turning it in for a client or anything like that. Where would you say that this is in the process for you, and what would you do from here?
Well, obviously, there's other areas that need to be finished. I'm looking at like this hand is too small of that hand, but this one's coming forward. So there might be a digital thing where I scale that up. I could put more washes over, go and clean up the background. There was another character over here that's an original sketch, but there's a lot of unfinished stuff here. And then on this, I could go back with like if it starts getting too light, like I have to define that headphone over here. I have to bring in darker value on the side. I might do that anyways. So that there's I would say I'm probably 60% done
Okay.
with where it is. And the other 40% is like, it's not, this is big stuff, but most of it is like, you zoom in, like I'm trying to get my hands on the screen. It's like, you might start conceptually like that wide, and then you're getting smaller and smaller, like you said, working towards the highlights and everything else. So that would be kind of the process of kind of working through it. It's just, it needs the type of thing that doesn't do well for demos, because I have to get quiet and
Yeah.
drill, like really drill down. Like, okay, this is I literally would put my head down, my head's going to be in the camera and all that stuff. But yeah, little things to make it, to steal a poor term from industry, make it pop. Those little elements of magic and crispness and details are all missing at this point.
Mhm. So you were saying in here that you feel that the hand there is smaller than you would like it to be.
Yeah, and I'm not going to be able to change that. Like I think it's in scale to his head or my head.
Mhm.
And that one, I guess it gives the impression of kind of coming forward, but that's quite a bit bigger than the other hand, and that's okay. It's not a deal breaker. I think it works as far as the layout, but those are things I should have fixed in the drawing. Honestly, I tried. I just kind of didn't have all the time in the world. So
I was curious because it sounded like you were saying that you and this is probably something that is from you doing client work. Depending on how much a job will pay, you get to put in different kinds of work on something for problem solving. You said you would probably address that digitally. Do
well,
you think
just because I can't, like, I'm not going to paint it out and paint, like, the process is too nuanced for me to do that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'd have to fix that digitally just to, I used to do everything traditionally, and
Mhm.
now, just there's things that digital does better, and that's one of them. I can make those adjustments really easy and really fast. So I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, you're fine. Yeah, I was just wondering if at any point in time there was a situation where you would look at this and try to fix that traditionally, uh, and kind of like the thing that brought you to that place. But like you said, it's just about what something is best at.
Yeah. So okay. So now you're touching on really a deeper conversation about what I call image versus artifact.
Okay.
And as illustrators, we deal with the image, right? Like we are licensed, or we're basically hired to come up with an original visual solution, but we don't, like, we keep the original paintings most of the time unless the
Mhm.
contract says otherwise. So if I'm working for books or magazine, like I've got all these originals in my house if I haven't sold them already. And that's the artifact, that's the thing, the tangible thing. And the client work is the image. If I want to finish my painting, I will. But sometimes it just makes sense for efficiency or ease of use just to get the image where it needs to be. So yeah, for me, it depends. Like, do I want a painting, or do I
Mhm.
want an illustration? And I've got a whole career as a painter where I do that, and I get everything right in the picture as right as I can make it. And on these, it matters less because that's not the function of it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of times where people will try to do something on a traditional piece, whether that's for fixing something or just kind of like rapid prototyping to know where they're going next.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with the idea of just taking a picture of something with your iPad, opening up Procreate, and then just pushing some values around
Yeah,
to really see where that'll take you. Like you said, use a tool for what it can do, and know that some things are just easier and quicker for digital. Respect your own time.
yeah. Well, Stephen, I love the fact that this is our first time working together. But when we were first introduced, I didn't realize that you were an artist too.
Oh, I
And
see.
it's really cool having your insight, because what you just said is it's just you're working on commercial projects. Like sometimes you just got to get it done,
Mhm.
and it's just the nature of kind of what we do. It's like, okay, deadline's here, I got to crank, and if I'm on my last 3 hours, I'm triaging. I'm going through like, oh, what needs attention, what doesn't, and you know what is passable and what isn't. So that's a very natural thing to happen on deadlines, and we don't have infinite time to work on those things.
Mhm.
But I appreciate everything you just said.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. There was one question. I think that this actually fits into what you were talking about. So David in the chat asked, "Does Sterling still get editorial illustration work?"
I do. I've been doing a lot more film work lately.
Okay.
Theater posters, not theater, movie posters. Um, I, I I retired publicly from illustration work years ago. Um, I divorced my agent and kind of went through. I'd gotten to do what I wanted to do as an illustrator, and I don't say that with ego. It's like I had goals and I achieved them. It's like, what's next? And one of the guys I studied with, Mark English, who I've already mentioned, I had the chance to sit with him in the studio, and I said, Mark, you've had this phenomenal career, and he truly did. As an illustrator and a painter, I said, everyone asks about your successes, but I'm wondering, you know, is there anything that you regret? He goes, I wish I started my painting career sooner. So, great voice. So I've always paid attention, and I'd been talking about being a painter for years and never had the time to do it. And I've got a family and all that stuff. So I had the good fortune of I was teaching at the university then too. So I say that because I want you to know that I was full freelance for a good part of my early career, and then I
Mhm.
started teaching, and that teaching position afforded me the chance to take a risk, right? So I didn't just stop and become a painter. I was like, okay, this is my new area of research, and I'm going to make some changes. And because I had a salary, I was able to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So at that time, I stopped doing illustration editorial work, and I've done some things since then, but mostly it's like I just seem to get a lot of poster work, and I've been getting some different projects I'm working on with films and things like that. And
Mhm.
but most of my stuff is I've got all these things that I'm self-authoring and initiating that are just at that intersection of art and technology and non-creative industries. So long
Yeah.
way of saying not so much anymore, but it's by choice, not by default.
Yeah. No, I like, so a thing that I think a lot of people who are maybe newer to just working professionally in general, whether that's for art or honestly even like customer service, anything like that, um, a pretty common pitfall is the idea of just letting work come to you or having what you do be the entirety of what you do. I think it's pretty important to still try new stuff and then explore what that can be professionally. It's not that everything that you do has to be something that gives you money or gives you maximum money that goes and pays all your bills, but going out and self-starting some stuff and just doing something that's interesting can inform what you do normally. And I think it's one that a lot of people fall by the wayside.
Yeah, and in fact, it's really my mantra at the university is to teach my students to be authors, and I don't mean like write a book, but author opportunities. And I go through an entire thing with pitching and how to put a pitch together, an executive summary, and all these things
Mm,
that it's the language of business. And if you can find where you have that value to bring, you have an idea. You don't always have to solve the thing, but you have to have um, an idea on how you might solve it, and then that proposal. I put up probably 30 to 40 pitches every year,
hmm,
and maybe a couple of them happen, and then most of them don't. But I love, I'll take an hour, have an idea, and put a proposal together like that holodeck. That was, it was just an idea, and
mhm.
uh, I got the right people to buy into it. We're doing I went to Green Bank Observatory out in West Virginia, which is these huge radio telescopes, and just wrote the lady and was like, hey, I'm an illustrator. I'm working on this project. I need to do a little research. Next thing I knew, I was getting to climb around on top of the telescope. And we're going out on the 20th to drone scan some of the telescopes as a practice for the big Green Bank telescope and
Nice.
make a 3D model. So just author things, go out and take initiatives and make things happen. But learning the art of the pitch, I think, is a really big part of that.
Is there anything, is that something that you teach in an online way as well? Or is that exclusively something you do in person?
No, I do that through the vision class for sure. And it's hard because that one it's so much like intensive one-to-one. I mean, it's in a group, but idea craft, you can go self-paced. Vision, you can go self-paced. Mm-hmm. But voice. Vision is the one that's there's so much unpacking, and what resources do you have, and what's your goal, what's your plan. But that's over there as well. So
okay, yeah. Whenever that one, so obviously you guys can go pick this up. Sterling has a website. You guys can find this. You can find this on your Gumroad, I believe. Correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The easiest way is thinklouder.co.
Okay, I'll put that up on screen for you guys. But yeah, if you guys want that and you don't want to wait for whatever version of that might end up on Proko later with some other additional things that he was talking about, go there. Like go check it out. Go pick it up. It's fine to buy it from somewhere else right now.
I really appreciate that. It's a really good group, and we've got a kind of a Discord rolling there. So I'm going to have some summer things available certainly for voice, which is finding your voice as an artist. But yeah, I love it. I love it when people reach out and they've found something, they found a grant, they found a job, they nailed a project, they fulfilled their dream and their ambition. I found out years ago that I'm just really hardwired to help people. I need to be needed. And so it's a way that feels personal and meaningful and just important. So
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I did kind of expect people to ask a question here when you switched to a different tool. If you're okay with the tool question.
Oh yeah, please. Any questions are good. Yeah.
Okay, so for the one that the brush that you pulled out that you were using for the record for the texture to get those grooves in there, is this a brush that's an older beat up one that you keep for a more textured purpose like this, or are you just like babying like a newer brush into this kind of texture?
It is about as cheap and nasty as yet up on the main camera here.
Yeah, here I'll give you that one.
Thanks. Oh, put it on my face. It's got bristles falling off of it, and it's just gross. But that's an example. Like, if you were a digital artist and you're going into Procreate or Photoshop, you'd design a brush that, like, I want to feel like a dry brush with broken bristles. Instead of going through each one of these grooves and actually trying to make that feel like record grooves, let the tool work for you. So that's just, I wasn't thinking, but it's like, I'll just use that, and I need to bring value down here. Otherwise this is going to look too unfinished.
It's fair. Yeah. Just have a little anchor in there.
Yeah. It's what I had on hand. And so nothing fancy. Actually, the opposite of fancy is just lazy. Me being totally lazy and not cleaning my brush.
No, so, those are valid tools just as much as anything else.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
You were going to say something else before I interrupted you, I believe.
Who knows? I'm sure it was probably less important, but I don't recall. I apologize.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah,
well, I'm putting a little wash over top of this, and you kind of see if I had a paper towel here, I'd use that. But I took that unbleached titanium white. I'm trying to soften that shadow, and I went a little bit heavy-handed. You can see it kind of obliterates it, right? But it's not dry, so I can kind of daub it with my hand and lift it up, and it just creates a skim over top of it, which softens that value. So I do that a lot, where in my lights, I will soften values, and then I'll push my shadows a little bit darker. Sorry, Stephen.
Oh no, no, yeah, I like this. I think that is also possibly in line with the idea of the other older brush that's kind of beat up.
Mhm.
Your finger, like daubing something like that, like you said, it gives you a little bit of that free weathering as well,
Yeah,
where there's an inherent texture to your finger.
for sure. And like, I can't keep doing this. Like I have to kind of move my hand around because
Hmm.
I end up with paint all over my finger. I paint with my fingers all the time.
Hmm. Let's see. I think there was another question here. So Phoenix Ritchie was asking, how do you identify a real world situation to respond to through art that will benefit from your perspective or skills specifically? It's a good question.
That's so that's one of the most important questions I got. And I actually have a gentleman who emailed me with that question, like, how do you get involved with this stuff? And like, how do you make it worth your time? And, is it how do we know it's a noble cause? And is it worth putting a proposal together? First and foremost, like I have to look at taking care of my family, right? And most things that I do, I have to at some point find a financial compensation. I can't just volunteer. And if I do volunteer, it's got to be something like really, really important to me. So I do try to spindle these things out and try to figure out where the value is to somebody else. That's a learned skill. It's not just something you know, I think people know how to do. I grew up. My dad was he started several businesses, and I don't take that for granted. Like I saw him do that, and it fascinates me. My mom was a designer. My dad, he's written 5 novels, and um, it just I'm grateful. I had a very interesting, very smart parents, and I watched them and I observed them. Uh,
Mhm.
but to create an opportunity, um, you have to recognize the problem first. So as they say in the world is design, find the pain point. That term isn't my favorite, but that's what they say. And then what might you have to offer? And stop thinking so much about what do I get from this, but what can I offer? And if what you offer has value, then you can think about like, well, okay, what is my role? What is my involvement? And a big part of what that is like, well, let's take the wildest idea. Like this holodeck as an example. What's the easiest yes for somebody? It's like, well, um, getting a grant, putting that proposal together. Uh, a low grant takes some time, it takes some effort, but there's a mechanism for it. So that's something I can look at through the university. Um, Build things out in phases. And if phase 5 is like, you know, we want to put one of these holodecks in every single hospital across the world to really affect and impact these kids. That's a crazy dream, and you're not going to be able to just jump into it. But
Mhm.
building a relationship that I've already got with the surgeon because I was artist in residence, that was another proposal, is a lot easier because I have a champion who is on the inside. It's like, that's cool. Let's talk about it. And I would encourage all of you to look around at your lives and think about who you know and what resources you have, what exposure do you have to think about making an impact in somebody's life. That sounds like a pretty good life mission for an artist to me is, making an impact and improving people's lives.
Mhm.
So I hope that helps a little bit, a little scattered, but
No, I think it's good because you pointed out some specific examples of how that worked for you, like identifying what is around you. There's a thing that people often think when they're trying to look at the people who have done stuff that they've liked or enjoyed, where they think that sometimes there's just an inherent greater availability for something around them. It's like for me, as a person who enjoys doing videography and photos, I'm like, I really miss when I lived in Seattle because everything was so natural. The kind of material that I liked to take photos of. I don't have that here in San Diego, but it's not a negative. Like there, that just means one, I either have to find something that is around me that is like that, and so I get to look around and explore and find out more things about the city that I live in, or there's just something different here. There's a bunch of there's a bunch of ocean, there's palm trees and other stuff. Like there are other strengths around me that aren't limiting. Those are just different.
right.
Um, there was
Doesn't,
one question.
doesn't
Okay.
sound to me either, but either Seattle or San Diego sound amazing. So
I think you have something very different where you are, but you're surrounded by different greenery.
yeah, they're very green here for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's its own thing. We're always jealous, the grass is greener on the other side, and that's only because you guys have grass. We don't have grass here.
Yeah, I remember my first time going out west, and it blew my mind. And yeah, so I love it for those reasons. It's just different.
Hmm. To follow up on the other thing you were talking about, exploring what's around you and how, like, more of what you were already talking about. Gail asked, how did you, Sterling, find that you need to be needed? They said MBTI. Do you know what MBTI is? I do not.
I don't nibbit.
Okay.
I don't know.
MIPT, MBTI, core strengths, career coaching, something else. I think knowing your own story contributes to style, they said.
Yeah, and so kind of a question and a statement. I agree with the statement that knowing what you love and what you're interested in, that is your style, right? That's the thing that you bring into it. Um, how did I find out I needed to be needed? I don't know. I just, I mean, to make it personal, my mom is like the brightest light in the world that I've ever met. She's, with exclusion of my own kids and wife. So with all due respect, she just glows, and she's just so positive.
Mm.
And she's someone who helps and endlessly helps. And I think I got a lot of that from her, just recognizing that I'm evenly split between my mom and my dad was important. But doing good in the world, like finding things that I've had impact on. And, it probably started with teaching. Honestly, like when I first started teaching, it was like kind of an extension. I got invited to come back to the Illustration Academy and teach. And like I did something that helped somebody, and it felt good. And I've just looked for more and more opportunities to impact people. And I think a very natural pathway for me is to go into the healthcare kind of profession and working with sick kids. I mean, I can't think of a more noble cause, or the elderly, or those who are struggling with any type of disability or handicap. Like that's the most extreme variation. Like I'm really called to go down to North Carolina and help those affected by the flood. I say that full disclosure that I have not. So I'm not a Boy Scout, but like I want to find a way to be able to do it, to take time away from my family to go help somebody. And if you're pulled towards something, then the world's speaking to you that maybe you should figure out a way to be involved.
Yeah. To trace back to that, oh my God, I can't remember the word right now, Sterling. The thing that we had to disambiguate there, yeah, MBTI. That's the Myers-Briggs type indicator.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you.
I have not had to refer to the Myers-Briggs test quite enough to call it MBTI. I'm not on first name terms with it like that.
No, yeah, and that's all new to me too. So again, just new as in past 7 years. So I could fill oceans with what I don't know. But yeah, I just I don't know. I think you pay attention and you kind of work on something, and it has a resonance and impact on you, and you want more of it. And that's kind of how helping people has worked for me. It's like, I got to do it. So
like you said, find what you're called to.
Yeah.
Trace it back. Let's see. So right now we are 2 hours and 18 minutes into this thing. How are you feeling about where you are with this currently, and where you would like to take it within this stream?
Well, I think in the stream, I'm gonna keep painting on it myself because I do want to share it when it's more finished. But I've taught what I needed to teach as far as the setup for the technique. It's not a home run. I don't dislike it, but it needs more time. And I'm happy to answer any questions you all have. But I also am very aware that, very cognizant that when I'm doing a demo, that it can be a lot to sit through. So I more than anything, I will stick around as long as you all want to ask questions. And if there's anything I can help you with, case in point, the question we just answered, that's what I'm really here for, is just to to see if I can help you on your creative journey. That's all.
So some people might take a little bit longer to kick their questions in because of just the delay of a stream, but Jocelyn already has one queued up. They asked, what are some unique challenges or benefits that being an artist has on married and family life?
Ooh, Jocelyn, you're going to ask the good question. Okay, so this is a big one. You got to choose the right partner. And I tell people that, my wife is the grit in the spine when mine fails. And some of these things I've been talking about with like my company Legendeer, when I built that, I was ready to pull the plug on it. And it was just like, it's just not happening. There's not interest. I can't start approving people to go to this Yosemite trip. And I went downstairs after talking to my business partner. Shout out to Adam Paquette. If you all know Adam, he's art director, illustrator, painter. He's worked for years at Magic the Gathering. But I had a conversation with him late one night and said, dude, I just can't do it. It's too much of a risk. I can't be responsible for people's flights and hotel accommodations. And I went down and told my wife, and she goes, oh, you're doing it. I don't care if you have to scale it down or you work too hard on it and it's too important to you, you're doing it. So she's given me tough love many times. And sometimes it's got its choice cuss words in it too. Just kind of shut up and do it.
Yeah.
So that's my wife. She's loving and amazing, but she's also tough. And she also happens to be my dream girl. So it works out well.
Yeah.
But she's at home teaching the kids. We do homeschool. It affords me a lot of opportunity to pursue things. I have to pursue things to provide for. That structure has been really good for us. And we have same interests. But I tell you, the one thing, I'm asking for relationship advice here, is we as artists are dreamers. And my biggest challenge is my mind is usually not where my body is. And that's a horrible thing to be in a relationship. And, not a dreamer, but not present, right? And I think that setting hours and structure and a schedule is so important for you, but also for them, because just think about it the other way. Like if you're that artist or you're married to or dating that artist and they're never available because there's always something that they want to make or have to create, that's untenable. You can't survive with that. It's just not fair. So set a schedule, develop a discipline. And I'm not the world's most disciplined person, but I like the idea of it and I try. So that Jocelyn is how I'd answer that. Find the right partner and then be fair to them with how you treat them with their time.
Mm-hmm. Well said. I think those things extend into all things, even outside of your romantic relationship or your family life. Yeah. I think the partner thing extends to your professional partners as well.
Yeah. Well, hey, I want to make sure that again, I'm feeling questions, but Stephen, I'm also cognizant of the length in your time. I can stop at any point and continue to work on this, and it'll be in its incomplete state forever on YouTube. But that's the nature of a live stream. But I want to make sure I give you a graceful exit and anyone else who needs to step out at any point. So
yeah, I'll be good. I mean, I think we probably got maybe no more than 8 minutes of questions, if I were to guess, including our answers. So let's see. I appreciate that, by the way. So we have a question from David here asking, or David, I don't know, with the way that it's spelled here. They said art schools in the UK, art schools are facing competitive times with very little government funding. Is it the same in the US?
Well, the government funding is in question right now for certain things. We've just, I'm not going to touch on politics at all, but it's, yeah, I mean, I think globally we have a financial situation going on. But anyways, I digress. Again, I don't want to touch on that stuff, but yeah, I mean, it's always a budget problem at my university, and I would say every art school. But I think they're businesses like anything else, and They cut, they make adjustments. They always have challenges. Art schools are facing competition from online programs, right?
Mhm.
Go back to what we said, like you don't need a degree. So what then does an art school offer that you can't get online? Well, community sometimes,
Mhm.
resources, uh, focus, time and effort, curriculum structure. There's a lot of things that someone would get out of a university experience, uh, like where I teach is not an art school; it's an art school within a university.
Mm.
But those are things like, if I send my kids to college in a couple of years, or when we do, it's like, what are they actually going to get out of it? Like what can they learn there or get from there, that they can't get in person? So yeah, we're seeing all sorts of changes in technology, politics, global economy. All those things are legitimate reasons why things are changing, and that's going to be a constant. That's just, we can't affect those things. So control the things you can, and get the best education you can. I think that's the best advice I have.
Mhm. Yeah, I think art schools and schools in general, I think if you were to ask anyone who's been a teacher at a school for time immemorial, they would say that funding has been a problem, you
For
know? Like there might have been a couple like real awesome years, and I do mean a couple, like 2 years at a time where it's like, "Oh no, yeah, we got some new cash infusion."
sure.
But by and large, I mean, I went to art school, it's like, goodness, like 13 years ago now. And at that point, it was already a thing where art schools were hurting. They were expanding to be bigger than they had been before, trying to teach all the things. Oftentimes with like all of the complaints that anyone else has ever had about art schools, and all of the positives that anyone has ever had about an art school, all of those things have been there and will be there. They're not going away. Some of them might, but that doesn't mean that there won't be something else that pops up in its place. Um, every learning and teaching as a whole is a consistently changing industry.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to a deeper philosophy that I share, which is you've got to be creative, not just in your drawing and painting, but in your business acumen, and
Mhm.
really be creative in all that you do, because it will change. Like even the people who they go and land a nice job at a studio. Well, the studios, we just have seen tremendous layoffs at some of the gaming and entertainment studios, and then they kind of build back up, and then some technology comes along, and then AI pops up, and this happens, and
Mhm.
those are, I mean, the only way to survive it, in my opinion, is by being curious and trying new things. Like, so, if you've not been on Patreon, you haven't tried Kickstarter or Gumroad or YouTube or this, like, familiarize yourself with all of them, because they're all tools, and they're very, very interesting too. I'm just, not to get too philosophical, but I mean, we're live streaming a painting demo across the, like we do that now. It's like, oh yeah, that's the thing.
It's just
It,
something we do.
it's
It's just there. We can talk to the whole world.
it's a miracle. I mean, it's an absolute miracle. So, um, 10 years ago, that wasn't a possibility. During COVID, that's how we solved COVID. Our university went online. We bought a travel trailer, and I was teaching my classes out of a travel trailer, um, as we were going on these camping trips. So amazing. I mean, just amazing, right? So
Mhm.
wild stuff.
Yeah, like you said, always be learning.
Always be learning.
I think I'll finish with one more here. Yeah. Uh, how does your process differ from your illustrations to your paintings?
Dramatically. When I first started painting, it was really a rebuff of my illustration. Like, so it's like I had all these
Mm.
skills I developed, and working with a client and ideating and thumbnails and all this. And so when I started painting, I was like, well, I'm going to not sketch. Sorry, I'm trying to get my camera to zoom here
You're good.
before it goes to sleep. I'm going to develop a process, and I actually made these things for my first painting show right here. I had two guys I was mentoring at the time, but we made thousands of these blocks. You can see them here. And my whole goal, I started sketching with these things. So you imagine my garage floor full of them. And I started like seeing different things in them. Like even that's kind of a cool group right there. So all this Gestalt, and I started seeing things in them. And then these are actually, I'm building these magnetized
Nice.
installation. I did something with Capital One years ago. But then I started painting into them, and a grid like 100% different. And I really pushed the abstraction in my work and trying to figure out where that threshold of abstraction and representation were. And then I had several shows, and I came to the middle again, where all that information to see where that line was and all my traditional skill sets started to come together. And now my technique I invented with tape is for illustration is my favorite process for documenting my family. And I'm trying to capture the presence of time, and I hide these canvases through my house. And every time I have think about the limitations I had as a father. So I'd have 15 minutes or an hour to work, and I could only draw for that long. Well, every time I have a canvas, the chair or behind the TV stand, I could take those 15 minutes and make a little progress and then cover it up and make progress. So we're back to the same idea we talked about earlier, Stephen, which is using your limitations and identifying your resources as a strength, not as a negative. So completely different process. And I think that they've become more aligned the more I paint and the less I illustrate. They actually kind of started to intertwine quite a bit more.
I like that. There was one other question. I know I said I was finished with the one before, but there's one that I think would be remiss not to address here. So Gail asked, which of your courses is the best for learning how to think? And by think, they mean how to have an organized thought process.
Okay, so there's two. Vision is the start and the end. And I know this is going to sound strange, but I can bring students at the very beginning of their path and the end. I walk through everything from note cards and organizing your resources and the way that I've kind of built businesses and things like that. That's what the vision class is about, is how do you codify that into a system and a process that you can then turn into that problem into a project. So that's vision. And then that begins at the start of somebody's career, and they might say, oh, I want to be an illustrator. It's like, well, let's go through that. And then at the end, they might say, I was an illustrator, I was a designer, I was a painter, and I want to do something else. It's a repeatable process. And so that one is there. As far as idea development, which is the core of it, IdeaCraft is 100% about idea development, and it's a scalable, modular process that voice references. There's actually a pipeline and a workflow, and then vision references too. So they like everything I do, they build on each other and they kind of stack up. So IdeaCraft I see as being like the genuine, widely applicable. I don't care where you are, if you're a beginner artist or a seasoned pro, learning to think more clearly and articulate your ideas, and having a process that's fundamental to every class that I teach. So I would start with that, and then vision is one of those things. If I'm offering it, it's got to be in real time. That would be a great way to follow up with it.
Okay, awesome. I hope that helps, Gail. You got the last question. So yeah, for anyone who has been enjoying what you've seen here so far, I do want to remind you guys that Sterling does have a course that has a little bit of extra stuff in it that is on pre-sale right now on Proko. That's in that link that you can see right down here right now, in the description, in the chat. I've dropped it a bunch of different places. If you've liked anything in this, chances are you like that course as well. So if you guys do want that, go check it out. Otherwise, you can find Sterling stuff on thinklouder.co. But you can also follow Sterling at Sterling Hundley on a whole bunch of socials out there in the world. Obviously, there's 40,000 different ones. You choose your favorite one. It doesn't have to be Blue Sky, but it should be Blue Sky. So everyone, have a good rest of your day. Enjoy yourselves. Make some art. And, I don't know, do your stretches. Drink some water. Thanks for being here, Sterling.
And thanks everybody for being here. This was a lot of fun. Hope you got something out of it.